A Republican safe space in a Chicago university was violated by the puerile macroaggressions of Black Lives Matter protesters.
My safe space brings all the boys to the yard, but your safe space is bigger than ours.
In other news, internet atheists are still edgy fedora-tipping autists that nobody wants to listen to.
Yelling God not real into a microphone doesn't make you Christopher Hitchens.
So Milo Yiannopoulos went to speak at DePaul University, I think it was. That's the name of this, it was a Catholic university, from what I've heard. And he was protested by a number of Black Lives Matter people. And I just have to say, I am surprised by the amount of condescension and just nastiness coming from these people. Every single time.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't be at this point. These are the same fuckers who went on stage with Bernie Sanders, right? And I'm not a Bernie Sanders supporter. I'm not. But you have to admit one thing about the guy. He's fought for, like, black liberation for his entire fucking life. He's been unemployed, but he's also been fighting for black liberation for his entire life. And these fucking bitches had the gall to go up and yell in his face. His face! I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. And I'm surprised by the amount of condescension, nastiness, and this unearned sense of moral superiority. I know I shouldn't be. I know I shouldn't be surprised by it, but I still am whenever I see this kind of shit.
Well, and they think that they're accomplishing something positive in this process, and all they're doing is pushing people away. All they're doing is making people more and more sick and tired of their childish nonsense.
Dude, totally. I was watching a video by somebody I really like, Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, and I really think this attitude from them comes from this sort of reverse psychology. It's the same reverse psychology that, like, Justin Trudeau has. If you kill terrorists, they win. It's like, you know, the terrorists want us to be angry at them, so instead of actually fixing terrorism and doing something to stop the problem, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna ignore them because that'll make the terrorists really angry at us. It's the same kind of shit. So, you know what? White people think that all blacks are violent, loud, ignorant, and lazy. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna be violent, loud, ignorant, and lazy. That'll show those fucking whiteys.
Yeah, I loved that the chant that ended up getting started was "Get a job." That was amazing. That was amazing.
It really was. I love the... Milo Yiannopoulos is doing us all a huge favor. He is doing a good service to civilization by going...
Yeah, just simply by exposing these people. Just by showing, look, they're calling Milo a racist, sexist, homophobic bigot.
Homophobic. He couldn't love himself more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're calling him a homophobe. It's amazing.
I'm no longer surprised by it. And honestly, I don't think you are either, because I've been staring into the abyss for too damn long, man.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised by anything anymore. I just put out a new video that's about a concept known as buck breaking. That is a mythology these people have, that they believe that any black people that are gay were turned gay by the white man.
What?
Yeah, and then they've been permanently damaged as a race.
Oh my fucking god! This is like fucking Nazi tier bullshit. Like
it is.
You know, the Jews are spreading feminism into our universities to attack the white man. I mean,
yeah. No, he believes the same thing. That's actually how I introed one of my videos, was any white supremacists who think that the gay conspiracy is coming to wipe out the white race. Don't worry, all racial supremacists feel that way about homosexuals.
Yeah, it's something they all share. It's like, you look at Black Hitler, like it's strange. Whenever you get so far into this identity politics, it's always the Jews. They always go after the Jews. I think it's because the Jews are like the most white people.
Yeah. Well, and they're kind of the people that first have this idea of a racial identity that was perpetuated globally.
Yeah.
A lot of people recognize that.
Yeah, I think that that honestly, all of the hatred of the Jews from these racial supremacists, it really does come out of that sense of just jealousy. Like, you know, because if you look at Western civilization, like the nation states that exist, Israel is the only nation state that exists within the realm of Western civilization that has any resemblance to a form of ethnic nationalism. It's the only one.
Yes.
And the white nationalists desperately want ethnic nationalism, and so do the black nationalists. And it's just like, you know what? Those fucking kikes, they got it. We got to take them down.
Yeah. It's the same example they use with the wall. When they say, oh, yeah, I get it. We don't get a wall. Israel gets a wall. Israel gets to decide who comes in and out of its country, but we don't. That's interesting.
I mean,
the Jews can do it.
Well, I mean, if you actually want to argue for the Mexican border wall, just look at the southern border of Mexico, where they have a wall with what is it, Honduras and Nicaragua? No, it's not Nicaragua. I think.
Yeah. Well, have you seen what Central America looks like?
Dude.
I mean, when Mexico is the best country in Central America, think about that. Have you been to Mexico?
Seriously, that is saying a lot. Like,
have you been to Mexico? It's a shithole.
There is one sliver of land that is like it's like an alien will land in Central America and say, okay, there's sentient life here. Everywhere else is terrible. That one sliver of land is literally like a mile surrounding the Panama Canal. That's it.
Yep.
And everywhere else is just a huge shithole or a tourist trap. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Then if you go to the tourist trap and leave that area, you are bound to get hurt. I mean, it's like inevitable.
That's basically their business: tourism and mugging tourists.
It's tourism and mugging tourists. It's a dual economy. It's great.
But and that's the thing when it comes to all of these white nationalists, like Black Lives Matter too. They have this. I don't even know how. I'm not quite sure how to describe it, except to say that it's this sense of entitlement, and I think it's this sense of entitlement that is born out of the this historicism. I've been into Popper lately, and the one phrase that he's invented to describe this is historicism. So there's just this idea, I think, that that history is progressing towards the natural good, right? That history is sort of naturally progressing towards a utopia, and therefore that means we are on the right side of history, and we are justified in doing anything we can to bring about this natural occurrence. And I think that that's the sort of mentality that these people have, that they are on the right side of history, so therefore everything and anything they do is completely justified.
Yeah, and they don't seem to realize how freaking terrifying that kind of thinking is.
I am literally like aghast, because I've watched your videos, Hagbard, about these black nationalists, and I used to think that the sort of we was kings mentality was just something that was like a fringe internet thing. It's not a fringe internet thing anymore.
Not at all. This is taught in Black Studies classes. This kind of thinking is taught in Black Studies classes.
And here's the thing that I've been thinking about. So you have atheists, the sort of MRA people, and then you have gamers. And I think that they've all been a sort of part of the left. And I'd like to present this to you as being my sort of intellectual foil on this podcast, the lefty that I hang out with to prove that I'm not racist. But
the one black guy, right?
Yeah, the one lefty to prove that I'm not McCarthy. I'm not some evil right-wing bigot. But there's been gamers, atheists, and MRA people who have all initially reacted to feminism and all of this stuff, and mainly like Anita Sarkeesian in gamers. But they all have only reacted to this shit the moment that the far left fringe just painted a target on their backs.
Yes, but of course, it's completely personally motivated, and then they have to find an ideology that actually represents something.
Yeah, so that's the problem that I'm having, is that when I look at this, I see this kind of blanket attacks from the left, and being, I should say, I haven't been a conservative all my life. I think it's been like the past 3 years is when I've actually started developing a deeper political philosophy that wasn't just entirely identity-driven, but I look back at history and I realize that this kind of shit has been happening for fucking ever against conservatives. The kind of shit that they're doing now to atheists and gamers and to just generally to men in general has been happening for decades, but it's been happening to conservatives. Nobody fucking cared when it was happening to conservatives. Nobody gave a flying fuck when it was happening to the other guy, But the only reason why this mass upsurge of these young millennial, right-wing terrorists, these internet memers have come up, the only reason it's happening is because the left is now coming for your toys.
Yeah, it's reactionary.
And I have to say, like, I don't know if the left has legitimately been this bad for for like decades, or if this is just something new. And my instincts tell me that it may be that the left has been this bad forever. And the only reason why we're now talking about how bad the left is because the left is now coming after your toys. It's been, they've been trying to destroy Western civilization. Like, look at Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter has always been a fucking douchebag, a fucking asshole who pals around with Islamic extremists and basically has no fucking idea how to present any kind of intellectual, honest position. He's basically just a charlatan, right? An intellectual charlatan, just like the rest of these far leftist people. But he is somebody in these far left circles, in the left, who the left doesn't, who still holds up as somebody who belongs in their ranks.
Well, they remind him. The thing is like a lot of people forget that Jimmy Carter invented the George Bush. Jimmy Carter is the first George Bush. Jimmy Carter was a functioning intellectual that bumbled on stage to be likable.
Well,
it's the same thing as George Bush. I mean, if you go look at his videos when he was running for governor, you can see very clearly that he's a consummate Harvard graduate who has a very high IQ.
Yeah.
And then he lost that election to a bumbling hick and realized that people vote for idiots.
But then you also look at the one guy, I mean, fucking Michael Moore, the guy who is just such a douchebag. You look at people like that, and I'm not even going to get into like the obvious internet memes of John Oliver, the current year man, or the fuck white people, the new, what's his name, the guy who's doing the Daily Show now?
Oh yeah, God, Trevor Noah.
Yeah, the fuck white people, haha, laugh,
watch it.
applause.
I watch it literally just to yell at the TV like an old man at this point. That's all I do. When I watch it, I just yell at the TV like an elderly man.
By the way, for those of you who don't know, Trevor Noah literally had a bit where he looked at the videos of white people dicking with robots. They were performing stress tests, okay? Which is a legitimate thing you do to robots, right? You literally just fucking kick it around and see if it'll work. And he was like, well, white people, fuck white. He literally said that.
Yeah, surprising white people would treat another, sentient species like this, isn't it?
Oh, you're racist. It's just, this kind of shit is just so prevalent now. And I actually look back at my own memories of even John Oliver and the Colbert Report. And I used to love the Colbert Report, and I have to say, Stephen Colbert was legitimately funny, right? He was. He isn't any longer. He's a fucking, he's nothing to me. He's ruined my childhood, but he used to be legitimately funny. And then I remember snippets of those shows, and just thinking back and remembering how wrong they were, but how I would just like absorb it anyway. And it was even recent as like 2 years ago, when the Ferguson thing happened, right, with Michael Brown. John Oliver was talking about the video that the police released of Michael Brown doing a strong-arm robbery literally on the day that he was shot. And John Oliver was like, this has nothing to do with the reason why he was shot. They're just releasing this to try and, defame Michael Brown. And I remember still laughing at it, but now that I look back at that, what a fucking retarded thing to say. They released video evidence of what the guy did on the day that he was shot. That has a lot of bearing on the kind of person that he is.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, imagine being a fucking thug. And that has nothing to do why he was shot. It's like, it's like saying somebody's a child rapist, and he literally raped a child the day that he got chased down and shot and brought into jail. That has nothing to do with a judge. You need to throw that evidence out of this case. That has nothing to do with this man's character. He's a good boy. He didn't do nothing.
He was a good Christian going man. He was a father. He was well respected in his community. Yeah, but he got caught diddling a kid. You think that might have been why the father ended up kicking him to death?
You're just fucking racist. You're just a racist. That's what you are. Just fucking racist. He was out spreading the word of Jesus. That right there. They literally said that. There was this fucking black church, and black churches now, they're now a hotbed of neo-Marxist the identity politics. That's basically, they've become a political arm of the far left now. That's basically what they are. If you look back at this protest for Milo, the guy, he was like an assistant preacher somewhere. I think he was like
of course. Well, the joke in the South was, if you met a black man, you were meeting a deacon. I mean, they're all deacons of their church. It's very bizarre, but it's just a thing in the South. So it was not surprising to me to learn that that's just a cultural phenomenon throughout.
Well, I mean, the thing is that whenever I would interact with these black churches, they were upstanding citizens. They were good people, and it seems that there has been like a sea change culturally, fairly recently, that has just turned all of these people from being upstanding citizens into being a fifth column. And I mean that in a very literal sense. These people who are spreading this racial ideology are literally a fifth column who are working against the survival of our fucking civilization.
Yeah, well, they don't like America.
They hate
They
America.
blame America, the country as a whole, for the previous existence of slavery and everything wrong with their lives.
Yeah.
Without realizing, these people hate their society without realizing their society is the reason why they're so comfortable to hate their society.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I've started to realize. One of the core principles or the core motivations of the left that I found is that the left seems to always judge whatever society they're in, usually Western societies, because that's the only place that, this modern leftism can survive in any legitimate fashion without totalitarianism like Hugo Chavez. But in Western societies, when they judge their own society, they don't judge it with any sort of comparative and contrast. Like, they're not judging the United States by Mexico, because, that would be unfair. It would be unfair to treat someone with brown skin as if they should be on the same level as some white person. You can't judge black people on the same standard as white people. I mean, they're black.
No, somehow that's racist.
Yeah,
I don't understand how somehow that's racist. And I was talking to someone recently about that issue right there, and I think part of the reason we're having this problem is 40 plus years of simply not being able to say anything negative about communities, but specifically a black community at this point.
That's a part of it. But what I think, this all comes from judging America against a utopia. Like, we're not judging America against, like, Russia or the United Kingdom or...
No, we're judging it against an ideal of something that's never been.
Never existed. And the reason why it doesn't exist, just to throw that out there, is because people are shit, okay? People are legitimately just shitty people.
Most people don't like to accept that, but most human beings are garbage.
Yeah, most of them, except for you and me, Heidbard. We're the only
ones.
Good. And all of the people who are listening to this podcast, you're beautiful people. If we were all that existed, there would be a utopia. But unfortunately, other people have to live. We can't gas them.
We can't just start killing people. That's one of my major ideological differences between me and the people who are against vision.
But that ideology you're talking about, that concept that we can't criticize any group of people, is actually one of the biggest problems. And I think I need to read a book that's recently come out. I forget the name of it. It was actually talked. Imagine this.
And the problem is that our ideology over here, the specifically American race-based ideology, has spread to other countries, and these other countries are getting angry now. I mean, like places like England and stuff. I know a lot of these people, these little secular groups in different countries. They're flat out saying we need to stop communicating with American secularists.
Well, yeah.
They cannot be trusted. I mean, at this point, it's just a cancer, and to continue to engage is to spread the cancer.
Well, I mean, they're honestly right. But I want to actually just point into, this has been a long journey for me, okay, me personally. There was a time, like 5 years ago, where I would just laugh at the idea that Bill O'Reilly ever had something interesting to say. But he was actually talking about a book titled The War on Cops, how the new attack on law and order makes everyone else less safe. And here's just a quote from it, okay? In terms of economic stimulus alone, no other government program has come close to the success of CompStat. The CompStat is the idea of broken windows policy, where the police will go into the neighborhoods, into black neighborhoods, to police them. Because, by the way, black neighborhoods are shit. If there's a murder in Chicago, right, it's in the South Side. You basically, if you ever hear gunshots, you know that it's coming in Chicago, you know that it's coming from the South Side. So the idea is that police are supposed to go into these neighborhoods and police them more, and that will help the black community because black people will no longer be killing other black people if there's the police around, right? That's the idea, and it works. In New York City, businesses that had shunned previously drug-infested areas now set up shop there, offering residents a choice in shopping and creating a demand for workers. Children could ride their bikes on city sidewalks without their mothers worrying that they would be shot. But the crime victories of the last 2 decades and the moral support on which law and order depends are now in jeopardy thanks to the falsehood of the Black Lives Matter movement. That's
well, and the other downside that people don't seem to recognize is when you look at things like how societies break down, this is one of them.
Yeah.
You do not attack your police officers. And for Christ's sake, if you watch the movie American History X, when the beginning of that movie, after he commits his heinous racially motivated act, when the police comes, he gets on his knees and tells his brother, "We do not fight the police. I broke the law. I'm going to prison. Goodbye." You cannot fight the police. And the other thing is this is between the police and the military. This is how a junta is put in place.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, this is where racism comes from. This is where racial hatred comes from. Is the instant you make your own personage completely above all criticism, people will fucking despise you. That's what's happening to black people right now. Not only are their actions going to cause the ghettoification of Chicago, Seattle, Ferguson, Baltimore, and every other leftist-run city in the entire fucking country, it's also going to cause a huge backlash of racism. That's exactly what you're seeing in Europe right now. That's exactly what you're seeing in the United States. I mean, thank God we have Donald Trump, who is not literally Hitler, right? Thank goodness that we have somebody who isn't actually an evil racist. Because if you had someone who was like a little more charismatic than David Duke going up there talking about Black Lives Matter,
we have a problem.
Snap your fingers. That's the fucking level of hatred that the far left has engendered in the populace.
And they don't seem to understand that.
Oh, of course not, because they have set up an entire worldview where if you criticize anything about them, that necessarily means you are racist. They're making the personal political. Every single thing about them with them is about their own fucking race. Well, you're just doing that because I'm black. It's a fucking shield. It's a shield to project an ego. A narcissistic, neurotic ego. And when you see those people up on stage, like the bitch who looked like she was on crack dancing around, seriously.
That was so bad. Oh my God. You're talking about the Milo thing?
Yeah.
At least the black preacher man kind of kept it together. He was trying to look professional.
Yeah, he was trying
I don't know why he drugged that dumb looking bimbo up on stage to bounce around and make an ass of herself, him, and the entire movement.
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't think he was that much better. He was blowing a whistle. Microaggressions don't exist. Oh, that's dumb.
Yeah, I'm not saying, racist. But he was at least being more professional than she was.
He literally fucking went on stage and said, "You're a bunch of racists. You're racists."
That's the same thing. To be fair, that was their first movement with Bernie Sanders. They stood in front of a whole audience of people who were going to vote for Bernie and said, "All you white people here is racist."
Yeah, exactly.
They literally just start. You cannot lead with that and expect to get somewhere, you fucking morons.
And this is the one thing that I really hope people realize. And this is coming from a little bit of a political place, but I'd like to take this out from a political place. Is that the problem right now is that the left is infested with these ideologies. These ideologies that instead of giving someone any kind of personal responsibility, it takes that responsibility from them and hands it to the state. And like this isn't quite coming from a libertarian perspective, although it could easily be. That is not something that is a healthy thing for society, to have the state responsible for your own actions.
No, it's not.
Especially when you have someone like Barack Obama. And this is the one thing. The left has been completely unable to criticize Barack Obama. He has been a huge fucking pile of shit from start to
I actually made someone flinch a couple days ago because I was on a political talk show and we were talking about the left and the right and they were all, praising Obama. I said, yeah, he's great. Do you think he signs the kill list before or after his first cup of coffee?
Yeah, I want to know if how many. I want to know if he really thinks he's doing anything for black relations. I mean, just as a like a tidbit of information out there, the racial relations in the United States have not been this bad since either OJ, right, or the LA race riots, depending on which.
No, this is LA riots levels. This is no doubt. This is a spark. This is the LA riots. We have them all the time.
And
it was called Baltimore. It's called Black Lives Matter.
If you want to know where this comes from, just look at Obama. Get himself on his fucking high horse, on his unearned sense of moral superiority, and lecture us about how, oh, my child would look like Trayvon. If your child looked like Trayvon Martin, you would be an absent father.
Yeah, that would be your fault.
Yeah, exactly. But there's this instant reaction. Oh, how dare you pretend? How dare you say that black people should have responsibility for their own life? That's fucking racist. Yeah, just like that guy.
Yeah, the problem is, at least when the LA riots happened, we had the good graces to call them riots and just straight out condemn it. This was bad. This accomplished nothing. It was stupid. Stop doing it. That's how we reacted to the LA riots. What we're reacting to now is like places in Baltimore where people are like, yeah, but you gotta understand, they're under a lot of pressure. They couldn't help themselves. They need to burn buildings and loot stuff, don't you know?
That was exactly what the mayor of Baltimore said. We need to give them some room to let off all their tension. So we're gonna pull the police back and let them destroy their own neighborhood because that's the way to build a good community. Letting black people destroy their own fucking neighborhood. I'm telling you, what has happened with this is that there is a sort of syndicate of irresponsibility, right? Where all the people in power have been brainwashed by this progressive bullshit narrative, who are implicitly empowering these bullshit artists, race hucksters, and adult children to behave like the fucking monsters they are. And I really wish people would stop laughing at this, because I'm not fucking laughing anymore. It's at the point where we are literally building a generation of people who will act as the mindless drones who will just attack anybody with a different opinion. This is like the Red Guard in China. And I mean that literally. These are political operatives. They are brainwashed to a point that they are literally political operatives. And I'm just saying...
Yeah, no, they're all... The majority of them are useful idiots. Like you said at the beginning, you thought these We Was Kings guys were just a phenomenon.
No.
Yeah, no, these guys are the idiot foot soldiers.
Yeah.
Idiot foot soldiers always sound like idiot foot soldiers. This isn't new.
Yeah. And, I mean, a part of me wants to say that this was all the communists' plan in the end. This is all their subversive tactics. And maybe that's true. Maybe this is all just like a conspiracy by the communists to overthrow America that actually won. Because, I mean, Marxists control the academics. But
yeah, well, and the other aspect is, they always said that, to win World War II, we essentially had to become the Nazis.
Uh-huh.
Well, then we rolled right into the Cold War. And to win that, I mean, when the constant propaganda campaign is look how bad America is, look how racist America is, look how much the economic disparity is in America, that's their propaganda.
Yeah, we're basically absorbed anti-American propaganda, and the truth is none of it is true. Not a single thing of it is true. For the vast majority of black people, if you're poor, it's because of your own goddamn decisions. Right now. For the vast majority of poor people, if you're poor, it's because of your own damn decisions. That's just the truth. But people don't like, because the instant you say that, it's the same thing with this fat bitch that I talked about, the Megan Tonjes, she was the one who said we shouldn't shame STDs. Why? Because the idea that you have responsibility for your own fucking life decisions, that's too much for you? The idea that you are responsible for the result of your decisions is just oppressive. It's just this bullshit. They want to be able to make every choice they want. Be the beautiful, flowering individual that they want to be, but the second any consequences for their actions come their way, oh, I don't want the consequences.
And we used to know this. We used to know this. We used to understand that there were inevitably consequences.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that left.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it has something to do with the amazing atheist. I think we should blame it all on him. The banana-loving faggot.
Yeah, of course. I mean, clearly, he is the degenerate that caused all this.
He is the one degenerate. The one.
I mean, he poured liquid hot wax on his dick as well. I mean, it's not it's not one incident. There's a GIF of that floating around. I do not advise you look for.
Yeah, no, I've actually seen that. I'm not gonna attack him for his penis, but I'm gonna joke about it because I think it's funny. But
yeah, the
thing he jokes about it too because I think he also realizes that either I'm gonna joke about it or that people are just gonna attack me for it. And I have to say that is something that I do have a legitimate sense of respect for him, that he's able to joke about it and take it all right. But at the same time, I think that when you're that big of a YouTube channel, you have to do it that way. It's this idea that, oh, I'm going to attack myself so people know that I'm a joke, so people don't just write me off.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like what my eventual plan is. As soon as I find out I'm going to get doxxed, I'm just going to hammer my own channel with every bad piece of information you could possibly say about my my life, and then move on.
Yeah, that's kind of like my plan. Although my plan is to never be doxxed. Like, my plan with my health is to never die, so I plan to never be doxxed.
Oh, well, there you go.
So the thing is, The Amazing Atheist had a video. You were talking earlier about how European skeptics think that we need to divorce ourselves from American skeptics. And
if the atheist is the representation of an American skeptic, they're right.
Yeah, they are, because, I mean, the dude is basically God not real level fedora tipping bullshit. That's basically all he does. He goes on to his YouTube channel and he regurgitates arguments that other atheists have made before him. And
yeah, I mean, he was even fucking late to his current transition to the pop feminism thing.
Yeah, I really think that I don't think that that's something that is that's like he's just doing it for internet fame, the pop feminism. I think it's something he's doing, but he just doesn't have a full... He doesn't seem to me to be someone who has a full intellectual grounding of why he's against feminism. It's just this emotional thing. Well, they're calling me a racist white man, but I'm the good guy. I'm one of the lefties. I'm one of the progressives. I can't be the racist. You know what?
Yeah, he never got past the first initial reaction, basically.
Yeah, it's all just this... the video that I watched recently was the video response to Crouten T, who by the way, to the listeners, Crouten T is someone that Hagbard and I both know. He's a good nice guy. He's a little bit on the left, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but he's a good...
Yeah, he's a good guy. Despite the fact that he's an evil lefty. But no, he's a legitimately good guy. I like him. The Amazing Atheist is decided to attack him... I mean, ultimately, it was a fucking straw man argument. The one thing about the video...
we literally got to watch a straw man be constructed before us. It was amazing.
And the funny thing is I'm a Trump supporter, right? And if he was attacking me about this, then maybe the straw man wouldn't be correct. But even if it wasn't a straw man, the argument was still bullshit. In the first, 10 seconds after he does his little banana joke, go watch the video, you'll see what I mean, guys. After he does his little joke, in the first 10 seconds, he says, take your fucking feels and take your politics out of the equation, and let's be objective. That's what he said. First of all, an internet atheist trying to say that they are objectivity. Okay, euphoria. Can you tip any fucking harder? But okay,
yeah, no, and that's the thing about him, is to say that TJ has ever been unemotional or intellectually sound,
or even intellectually honest, because the thing is, the amount of intellectual dishonesty in this video is fucking astounding. Because 5 minutes later, he says, the reason why I'm against this, by the way, is because Donald Trump is just disgusting. His just Muslim ban is disgusting. 5 minutes ago. 5 fucking minutes ago, you were saying that Crouch should take his politics and his emotions out of the equation and be objective. But when it comes down to your argument, oh, how convenient that you don't have to take your politics or your emotions out of the equation. It's just this double standard bullshit that I see. I hate to say it, I see this from the Christian conservative movement, which is why I despise a lot of Christian conservatives. Not all of them, by the way. If you're listening, you're Christian. I'm not racist against you, but a lot of Christian conservatives, the argument is basically, well, God told me so. And it's such a
and
dumb
that's
argument.
Ridiculous. And it's no different than listening to a fucking Muslim preacher say it. It's all the same to me.
It's also the same as bullshit artists like TJ saying, oh, I'm just being objective. You can't have your emotions or you can't have your politics in it because your politics aren't objective. But I stand upon the fucking mountain of glory, upon the precipice of the knowledge of God. My emotions and my politics are objective. Go fuck yourself, TJ, you disingenuous hack. You disingenuous fucking charlatan. I mean, even if you weren't being a hypocrite, your argument is wrong, right? Your argument is bullshit. But the fact that you had to layer it in this just bullshit of hypocrisy is just astounding to me. It astounds me that anybody with half a brain could watch this argument of yours, just see that level of hypocrisy of you saying, keep your politics out of it, keep your emotions. Oh, by the way, Donald Trump's disgusting. Bernie Sanders is just beyond.
I mean, The Amazing Atheist, his whole presentation style of standing in front of a camera, directly shouting into it, I will never understand how that got him big. I may die without understanding the psychology that got him where he is today.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest. I do my best to be intellectually honest, right? And I know that I've because in my videos, like my Black Lives Matter videos, either in the comments or as a blurb, I usually try to say, hey guys, I want to make sure you know I do think police brutality is a problem. However, the thing is that it's not a racially based problem, and the reaction of Black Lives Matter will cause more problems than it will fix. I try to be intellectually honest. I don't ever say anything that's dishonest in the video, and whenever I try, because like between you and me, Hagbard, there's an argumentative tactic called rising above the weeds, right? So
Yes.
if you're like in the weeds, that means like you're arguing about percentage points on a graph, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's not interesting. Nobody's going to sit and watch a video of 10 minutes of you saying, well, you're saying that guns cause 1.5 murders a year. I think it only causes 1.4. You know, it's that kind of bullshit in the weeds argument. I take it out of the weeds and I look at something that is obviously bullshit and I'm like, hey, look at that, point at it, and laugh. That's what I do, right? And sometimes that doesn't allow me the opportunity to be as intellectually honest as I'd hope. And I always add a blurb in it that says, oh, by the way, here's an extra thing that I want you guys to know to make sure that I'm not being, like, intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, well, and I've told people, like, I was campaigning against police brutality. I work for a guy that's on the fucking police commission who makes sure that they get body cameras in this area.
Yeah, and
he cut the deal.
And to be perfectly honest, body cameras, why the fuck don't we already have those across the nation?
Exactly.
There's no reason. There is no excuse not to have a body camera on every single cop. What, that might cost like what? $1 million. $1 million for the entire.
Chump change. In reality, you couldn't quote me a number that would shock me. I mean, come on. These guys have. Oh yeah, we can have cars, guns, many different radios.
They're ordering fucking tanks. They're ordering extra tanks that from the fucking Defense Department.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, that technique is very, very smart. I disagree with it, but I understand financially why we've set that program up.
Yeah,
for all intents and purposes, it's money laundering, but with supplies.
Well, I mean, if we're perfectly honest, though, like the government has to work somehow, and that's one of the ways that the Defense Department can keep itself afloat. So
that's what I'm saying. It's money laundering.
Yeah.
It's internal money laundering within the government.
It feels scummy on the surface of it, but if we're perfectly honest, it's also scummy to be taxed, you know? I don't like to be taxed, but I also like to have roads, right? So
exactly. Well, and it's kind of like the my joke with someone was, it's okay, so let me get this straight. Our government is evil if we sell our old supplies to a third world or developing nation, right? Okay, cool. Let's just sell it to our cops. That'll keep us. Now we're even more evil for doing that. Well, what do you want me to do? Just literally burn money?
Yeah,
that's what you're asking me to do. Burn money.
You're asking to be taxed more. You're asking for the government to take more of your shit. I want as much.
Because they can't help it. I mean, these things exist. These old tanks that we no longer need are a thing.
Yeah.
And they have value still, inherent value around the globe.
Yeah.
But we should just burn them. We should just destroy them, melt them down, make smart cars or something, right?
But you don't understand, Hagbard. This is a Spider-Man thing. We have great responsibility. You have the responsibility to be better than all of the brown people around there, because we're white. It's just...
well, I mean, it'd be really funny when it comes out that he is actually racist. That would be really funny.
Who is?
The leader of Marvel, whatever his name is, that old man.
You think... what is his name? I know the guy you're talking about, the guy with
only
the
paternally.
Glasses.
He doesn't think anything negative about these people. He just thinks that they need help all the time.
That's the thing that I find this ridiculous. I find this ridiculous with The Amazing Atheist because it's the same fucking mentality. And I hate to attack the left on this, and I am just waiting, Hagbard, and all of the listeners, I am waiting for there to be some ridiculous thing on the right that I will have to be lectured to on how ridiculous this, and this is about the culture of the right. But honestly, I will be willing to take that. And I want to make sure you know, and the audience knows, that it is entirely possible and plausible. And not only that, it's like the longer time goes on, the probability of this happens approaches 1. In other words, it probably will happen with 99% possibility that the right wing will be terrible and shitty again in the future, right? That's going to happen. Right now, it's the left. But when it comes down to the Amazing Atheist, there's just this unearned sense of moral superiority that just drives his entire argument. And you can see that in his argument against Quran. Because first he's like, well, take your objectivity out of it, but I stand upon the precipice of fucking universal knowledge because I am the most objective person in the fucking universe as I jack myself off with a banana in my ass in front of 100,000 people on a fucking webcam on YouTube. Yeah, you're objective. You're a real beacon of fucking knowledge, TJ.
I like I said, I don't even understand how that has come to be the representative style for the YouTube atheist community. It really is.
And the thing is that, like, there are YouTube atheists out there who do a good job. I think Creationist Cat has a really funny way of doing it. I really like his. Cynical Atheist does his little, like, musical numbers. I also think they're fucking hilarious. Like his, the one about feminism and Islam. Oh, that was great. I loved it.
Oh, and honestly, have you seen his? He just put out a packet that allows you to edit all his old characters.
Oh, really?
You can literally take them and put them into Adobe After Effects, and they're pre-rigged. You can just play with them. He wants you to play with them.
Honestly.
And have you seen his production videos where he talks about his production and he's going to use that super gay voice?
The guy...
All right, y'all. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. It's going to be sweet.
the guy needs more subscribers. He really does. Honestly, I feel sad that I have more subscribers than him because you look at his production value and then you look at mine, okay? Just look at his... It's honestly...
Yeah,
I'm never going to get over that. I think it's basically because he's too well produced, it feels like he's like corporate or something, right?
Yeah, but he's not. He's just a guy. I mean, this is not hard. If he probably does do this for a living in some capacity. But just like Devin. That's why Devin's videos are such high production value.
You mean Devin Tracy?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that, like, with my videos, I think there's, like, a peer-to-peer level that I have, so it feels like I'm just one of the bros, and I'm just making my memes for my internet buddies, you know? So there's that feel that I'm just, like, one of you guys, and I think that's a feeling that Satan doesn't get, and I think ultimately that's what the Amazing Atheist has, is just the feeling of, I'm one of you guys. I think that's why he's successful, but that also comes in with, like, this unearned sense of moral superiority. And I really do believe that this unearned sense of moral superiority is endemic from the left, because you have to go back to what I said earlier, right? Karl Popper has this idea of historicism, that we are on the right side of history. You never hear the right wing talk about which side of history they're on. They don't care about if they're on the right or wrong side of history. We care about being on the right or wrong side of statistics and facts. But when you talk about, like, the response that a lot of left-wing people have, like even Amazing Atheist, you can see that from him, is that, well, Donald Trump, he's disgusting. And I'm on the right side of history because I'm yelling into a camera on the internet. Fuck Donald Trump. And the thing is that I'm not necessarily arguing for a Muslim ban, right? But the thing is that his initial argument that you should be more afraid of car crashes than terrorism is bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's bull. Because I mean, let's take it on face value that there are much more car accidents than there are terrorist attacks, which, by the way, might not be true for in 5 years, because if you look at the terrorist attacks where Muslims are in the Middle East, it's a lot. It's like, what, 20, 30,000 a year? And you got to think each one of those gets a kill count of about 2 or 3, right? And then you have to also think every single person who's joined Islam, that's about, what, 20, 30,000 people? Like, yeah. It's like 10,000 people a year, something like that, some extraordinary number. That's a lot. I mean, you're starting to get to numbers that are equivalent to car crashes. But even if you accept that this apples and oranges comparison is worthwhile in any moral sense, which, by the way, it isn't, because cars don't kill you on purpose, right? There's a difference. And the other thing is that the percentage chance of you dying in a car accident is really extremely low, because I have like a 0.001% chance of dying on any day that I get in my car, because cars are pretty safe right now, right? So
yeah, comparatively.
Even if we accept this apples and oranges comparison, it's still a bullshit comparison on the face of it. Step one is to say there actually is a lot of Muslim terror around the world that is comparative. I mean, just look at the destruction of civilization and the civil war that Muslim sectarianism has caused in any pick any.
No, there's no even in predominantly Muslim countries. Once Islam is initiated, clearly that's when peace comes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Clearly, once you have a totalitarian state, everything is peaceful. I mean, that's just step one. Step one is just look at the civil wars that this causes. But okay, let's just accept his apples and oranges comparison. Here's another thing. We aren't talking, TJ, about whether or not we should be afraid of Muslims. Okay? We're talking about whether or not we should fucking do anything about Muslims. Here's a fucking hint. We have stop signs for a fucking reason. We do everything we can to stop
that's why we
accidents.
no longer drive around in 1960s Buicks, because we've changed everything about what a car is.
It's why we fucking have seatbelts, you disingenuous hack. We have seatbelts to stop us from dying in car accidents. Okay? We have those for a reason. Now, here's an idea. Maybe we should do something, just something, to stop terrorism. And maybe one of the things we can do is either do better background checks on the fuckers that we want to come over, or maybe, just maybe, we can have some kind of immigration ban to allow the people who are already here to assimilate, just like we did with the fucking Irish, Chinese, and Italians. And then step number two, okay? That's step number one, is how stupid he is that this apples and oranges comparison is just completely wrong. Because we already do something about car accidents. Step number two is actually looking at it and saying, well, if you even compare these apples and orange comparison, cars can't vote. A Muslim, if you're born in America, can vote. 50% of British Muslims, one of the most fucking progressive places in the fucking world, apart from Sweden. 50% of their Muslims think homosexuality should be illegal.
Well, clearly it should be. Homosexuals are degenerates.
Yeah,
you know
exactly. This. Everybody agrees. Flip a fucking coin, TJ, you disingenuous hack. Flip a coin.
Well, and of course the Muslim mayor of London. This is all fine.
Oh, okay.
This is all fine.
Because, London is just a progressive utopia. They never have any problems with Muslim rape gangs. They never have any problem with Sharia law or anybody doing anything sketchy. It's just a progressive utopia. Rotherham didn't happen. I mean, thinking that a pedophilic warlord is the perfect human has no effect on your mentality at all, TJ.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything specific. I'm just saying, talk to your average Middle Eastern Muslim and try and get him to condemn sex with a 9-year-old. He won't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the problem. And the problem is that TJ sets up this argument and he defends it, right? And even against Crot, right? In the specific context, his argument falls apart when he admits that Crot is right. When he admits that Crot is right, he could put a 16-second long snippet of what he says. I agree that the threat of Islam is more than just terrorism. Okay, there we go. That's all you had to say. But you still have to stand upon this moral precipice.
No, he doesn't just say that. He says Crowd is entirely right. He says it's a bigger problem in Europe. It is a problem that it's not just terrorism. He concedes every point. Basically, that whole video could have been titled, "Keep My Name Out Your Mouth," the video.
Yeah.
He was just mad that he got called out for being a sissy. Yeah. And he is a sissy.
He is a fuck. I mean, he makes bad arguments on the internet that are basically regurgitations of other people's arguments. He basically yells into a microphone that God not real, because oh my God, God isn't real, everybody. Oh, that's such a Wow, that's such a great. That makes you so intellectual that you're able to regurgitate somebody else's conclusion. That makes you so smart. And the thing is, I will never say that I am intelligent because of what I make on YouTube, right? If I write a book in 5 years about philosophy, maybe then I'll decide to have some small kind of egotistical boost. But I'm never going to say that I have the objective perspective because of fucking YouTube videos.
Yeah, I make little videos on the YouTube.
That means that
I technically get less views than some makeup channels.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, but that means that I am now God because I have the objective perspective. I mean, the thing is, the entire argument, like you're saying, the entire argument was, how dare you question my moral floundering? How dare you question my... And there are layers
and
of
I love when he goes back and looks at his videos and he types in Islam. First and foremost, a handful of the ones he goes by are attacking people criticizing Islam.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of them are a year old or more. Yeah. All of them.
I just have to think, okay, so there's another level of hypocrisy that I just want to bring up. And again, I'm not going to argue for the Muslim ban, all right? Even though I am a Trumpster, you know, I'm on the Trump train pretty hard right now. But I'm not going to argue for that because I'd like to keep my politics out of this. I'm also not going to argue for guns, but the thing that he does that fucking sickens me is he says in the second half of this video that a Muslim ban would be against the Constitution. You know what else would be against the Constitution, you disingenuous fuck? Banning assault weapons. You're so happy about, oh, the First Amendment, guys. What about the Second Amendment? You care about objectivity and taking politics out of it when it suits you. You also care about the Constitution when it suits you. And by the way... Of course,
and I love the people that push the narrative of, oh, you know, is that what the Founding Fathers meant? The Founding Fathers supported a man who came and approached them for a fucking cannon. Yeah. Literally, one of the first things ever moved to a private citizen was a cannon.
Yeah. He asked, hey, can I have a cannon on a ship to keep pirates at bay?
And they were like, yeah, fuck off, go ahead.
Yeah, do what you want. And the idea that a Muslim ban would go against the Constitution or the Founding Fathers, you know, what they had in mind is absolute bullshit. I mean, I'm going to talk to you. This is what I studied, by the way, okay? The Constitution does not apply to people who are not in the United States, okay? The Constitution does not apply to people or areas who do not have an either de facto or de jure control of the United States, right? So if you are a military, if you're the United States military and you invade Iraq, then while you are in Iraq, the Constitution applies because there's a de facto rule of the United States government, right?
Yes.
But if we're not there, there is no argument that we're violating their First Amendment rights.
No, and again, another thing. Let's point out that this law that Obama or that Trump was talking about, it has been used in the past several times.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter
of banning a group. No. More recently, Obama did it.
Oh, really?
He did it against the Iraqi citizens in 2009.
Oh.
If you were Iraqi, you could not come to America.
Wonderful. Isn't that progressive of him? And that's what I'm talking about, is nobody's willing to criticize Obama when he does this bullshit. He's just some fucking magic black man.
Well, of course, a black man got in a position of power. Now he's unassailable because to attack him is racist. That's what we've come to.
Exactly. And that's the thing. So if you look at TJ's specific argument, there's the first level of hypocrisy is that he wants to just don't take your politics and your emotions out of this, but I'm going to apply my politics and my emotions into this. That's completely hypocritical. It's such a fucking hypocritical thing to do. The second level is that, oh, well, I think that he said this before in his older videos, we should ban assault weapons because you don't need that if you're a citizen, but banning Muslims? Oh my God, that's against the First Amendment. So he wants the Constitution to apply when it suits him, but when it doesn't suit him, you know what? Fuck the Constitution. The Founding Fathers, they didn't know about assault weapons and school shootings. They had no idea what it would be like. It's just, and then the level of hypocrisy that he coats his argument with is fucking ridiculous. And if you go a step farther, both of these arguments are wrong. He is wrong to say that there's that keeping Muslims out is against the Constitution, because it is completely fine. The United States could literally become completely isolationist and keep everybody out. everyone.
That's completely fine. That is within the law.
There's nothing unconstitutional about that. There's also nothing un-American about that, because we did that with the fucking mix in the fucking Italians. We did that with them. I'm trying to keep my politics out of this, although he attacked my daddy Trump, so I can't I can't deny that I'm offended a little bit that he'd attack my presidential candidate. But I just have to say, if Trump does get into the office, all of these people who are saying that they'll leave, honestly, I'm happy about it. I really wish they would. Because that's the best reason to vote for Trump. If you vote for Trump, they will deport themselves. But I think honestly there are a lot of issues that you and I can agree on, and I think one of the issues we have, like we're talking about the Constitution and the role of government, I think one of the things that we agree on is that there is a role for government. So
yes, and I think that you should be open to criticizing the government. That's the other thing, that I have no problem with that. My issue is that some people will take that stance and then say, well, that's the only position I hold. Fuck American government. Yeah, everything's wrong. And it happens on the right, too. That's what a libertarian is. What is a libertarian but a right-wing nutjob who's decided everything about the government is wrong?
Yeah, the thing is that it's not... Because the thing is that it's not all libertarian. All of the libertarian perspective isn't that. I would say it's specifically the anarcho-capitalist or an anarcho-libertarian perspective. It's a perspective that does not comport with reality. It is not a realistic thing to say that we can have a government. Like, oh, I'm going to have a metropolitan area with millions of people living in it, but you know what we're not going to have? We're not going to have sewage or city planning.
Or police.
Or police.
We're just going to let the people handle that, because, it's not like that's how gangs form.
Yeah, we're going to let corporations handle. And I do believe, honestly, Hagbard, I think there is a commonality between the leftist extreme and the sort of right-wing anarchist extreme. And I think it's this idea that I want to have the ultimate power and be able to do whatever I want, and you can't tell me not to.
Yeah, they're both just children, essentially. They're both just angry children who are mad that someone would ever tell them not to play with their toys right now.
And I know that both of you and I, we're digging pretty hard against libertarianism and anarchism. There was a recording that I'd like to play for you guys in the audience of us having a conversation with someone. I want to say this: we're digging on this topic pretty hard, but this needs to be said. The person we had a conversation with was extremely polite, extremely wonderful, very friendly, and he expressed a level of intellectual honesty that was beyond anything I could have ever imagined, really.
It was almost shocking, honestly. I've had a discourse with someone who reacted the way he did was almost shocking and modern.
It really was. So I want everyone to know that this person is not someone that you should go and attack. It's not someone who you should hate, even though we're digging on it, because Hagbard and I both think that...
That's just how we are.
So the thing is that I do disagree with libertarianism, and I think that your fedora-tipping atheism is euphoric as all hell. But the thing is that I want to make sure you know this is all in good fun. We're not trying to dig at you. We're not trying to be mean. We just like shit talking. It's fun. And for anyone who's out there, you need to know I don't go out to find these people to argue with. So if you feel that this person didn't do a good enough job defending anarcho-capitalism or whatever, go ahead, send me a tweet or DM me. My DMs are open. Don't send me any pictures of dead kittens, and we can have a conversation about it. If you want to be on the podcast, just talk to either me or Hagbard, and we'll work it out.
Yep, and here come the pictures of dead kittens.
Wonderful. I asked for it. So I'd like to make sure everybody understands. I don't go out and seek these people who come on the show. If you personally feel as if the guests on the show don't have a good representation of your beliefs, or if you think you could do a better job, if you think they weren't tough enough with me, if they didn't debate me good enough, then you can fedora tip yourself right to my Twitter inbox, and you can invite yourself on the show, just like everybody else has. Because, like I said, I'm not going out and trying to find these people. These people have generally come to me and asked to be on the show and asked to have a conversation, and that's where we found all of these guests. Like, what is it that we should call you, by the way?
Sam's fine.
Okay, like Sam, for instance. How is it that we got in contact with you?
So I've been a pretty big fan of your channel, and I found out about Hagbard through you and through the Cynical Jerks. So I saw the kind of podcast sellout thing that you did, and I checked that out. I loved the first episode, and I figured that I had something interesting to bring to the table. So I sent you a DM on Twitter, and we discussed it. We had a hangout where we talked about what kind of stuff we're going to be talking about, and we set a date, and here we are.
And here we are, indeed. And we have Hagbard here, and we're going to generally talk about your political opinions and see where we all align. Because the first episode we did was about Marxism, and even though Hagbard is a dirty lefty, and I'm a right-wing extremist, we both agree that Marxism is fucking retarded, and they should be gassed. That's what we basically think about Marxists. But
maybe not gassed.
Fundamentally, we think they should reopen the camps. I mean, a Polish shower wouldn't hurt the society.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't. Honestly, a little bit of Zyklon would not hurt a Marxist. It really wouldn't. It might make them a little more clear thinking. That's just basically it. But we'd like to talk generally about your opinions, your political position, your philosophical position, and see how the sort of moderate left and right-wing extremists that Hagbard and I are think about it.
Okay. So, generally, if you were to look at the United States now and what it is now and the existing political parties, I would probably more align myself with a right-leaning libertarian. But the thing that we're going to be talking about today, which is anarchy, specifically anarcho-capitalism, doesn't really exist on a political spectrum. Having some kind of party dedicated to anarchy is oxymoronical because that would serve to grow the size of government. So that would make no sense. But we're going to be talking about the practical application of anarchy and what that would look like, how certain things would get done, things like immigration or a military or a court system, stuff like that. But then we're also going to talk about the philosophical justification, if you will, for anarchy.
Okay, that sounds promising.
Yeah, let's start there. Let's start with the philosophical justification for anarchy.
Okay. You don't really need to look much farther than the atrocities of government throughout history to justify the absence of a government. You really just need to... that depends on how you justify it. If you look at things like Jim Crow laws and slavery and the Holocaust and the Trail of Tears and other horrible things, all of these things have been perpetrated by the government. You really just need to understand that the government has a monopoly on force, and so any force used by them, they can justify, and we anarchists believe that any use of governmental force is illegitimate. So that's how we justify the absence of a state.
Well, do you believe necessarily that all force is illegitimate?
For the most part, yes. The initiation of force. So if I were to go to you and rob you at gunpoint, that's not self-defense. So if you consider self-defense force, I don't really consider it force, then that could be legitimate. But any initiation of force, so robbing, murdering, stealing, raping, stuff like that, is illegitimate. And these are all, okay, maybe not rape and murder. No, murder. State doesn't really rape people, but all of what I've described.
Well, at least you reined it in there. I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if I was in charge, I would have the state rape all Marxists. That's what I. But no.
Okay.
So the very beginning of this moral justification, I mean, it starts with what sounds like a heavy appeal to emotion, if I'm pretty honest. I mean, you reference all of the bad things that government does, like this, like the Trail of Tears, like the Holocaust, like the Nazis. They stomp on baby ducks when you're not looking. It's just, it feels like a heavy emotional argument.
Okay.
And I'm not going to fault you for that, because that is where a lot of political beliefs come from. But is there but ultimately there's this idea that government is a monopoly of force, and are you saying that that necessarily means that government will take out actions that look like the Holocaust?
I struggle with the philosophical notion that it is
Hey,
inherently a
you
bad
had a buzz.
thing.
Can we do a cut and can you start that sentence over again?
Yeah.
What was that buzz, by the way? Was that on you?
My struggle is that it's philosophically wrong for the government to have a monopoly on force because the only alternative is for nobody to have any monopoly on force, which is going to be constant warmongering and warfare.
Well, yeah.
Why
You have
Well, I mean, when you don't have a monopoly on force, that generally means that there's a competition for that force. So,
yes, and a constant striving competition. So nation states
but
constant.
also I think that you're forgetting that when these entities that will prop up in anarchy, when they don't have a monopoly on force, if they want to use any kind of force, like when we talked about force, I mean self-defense force. So you're talking rights enforcement agencies, that kind of thing. Private security, that's the force that I'm referencing. If a private entity wants to use that kind of force, they're going to have to pay for it out of their own pocket. So that mitigates the incentive to engage in warfare or warmongering, like you said.
How has that ever mitigated the incentive throughout history?
Never has before.
Never has before.
No,
Germany paid for those Zyklon B showers. You know, somebody paid for that, right? The idea that you have to pay for it, that it mitigates the incentive, that doesn't necessarily fit.
And monarchs had to. So if you wanna harken back further in history, monarchs paid for their own wars.
Right.
Okay.
So
what I was saying
Go on.
was that in the United States right now, the U.S. military is funded and paid for taxpayers, or funded and paid for by taxpayers. And there is a lot of waste in the military because most government programs will have some form of waste. But what I'm saying is that the government really has no incentive to be careful about how much money they're spending on the military because they're not paying for it with their own money. So when private companies have to pay for a private security firm with their own money, they have to be very, very reserved and conservative about when they use their private security firm.
So I mean,
because they have to.
That's just basically an argument against government waste. But necessarily speaking, if you talk about this in economic terms, you're trying to say that there is a very high risk and very high cost for entry into the market and no reward for waging war. That's necessarily not true. I mean, there's a lot of reward for waging war in an economic sense.
It's true.
I mean,
it's true.
Let's say that if Apple decided to get a private army and then colonize the Congo for some fucking reason, or if they wanted to cut out the warlord middleman and just decided to set up a corporate state in Africa. I mean, necessarily speaking, that is something that would be profitable. So the idea that the government not having a monopoly of force would necessarily stop the use of force doesn't follow. It isn't, even if we let's not even talk about this in human instinct terms. Let's talk about this in economic terms, right? It is incredibly it is an incredibly good prospect for someone to own a colony. You know how much fucking money you can make off of taxing people? If a corporation wanted to use their private army to set up a colony in Africa or wherever, they could if there was no monopoly on the force, on the use of force. And that would be economically feasible. I mean, not even economically feasible. That would be, shit, man, fucking sign me up. Sign me up for that investment. I'll put $100 down and make $1 million on that stock investment.
Okay. Well, we need to be talking, what kind of anarchy are we talking about? Are we just talking about the United States becoming an anarcho-capitalist society, or are we talking about the entire world becoming an anarcho-capitalist society? Because if it's the second one, then what that corporation would be doing would be a violation of the very principles that make up anarchy. So maybe we could have some kind of colony, but any colony that existed that Apple would have set up would have to be funded, or not funded, it would have to be a voluntary colony, in the sense that anyone being taxed would be choosing to be taxed.
Right.
And so if they wanted to be taxed and allowed the corporation to pay through things that way, that wouldn't be in violation of anarchy, because it's a voluntary tax, similar to like how raffles work now, like the lottery.
Right. That's really nice and all, but who's going to enforce that?
That's just called feudalism, man.
Yeah, that's just called that's called like the Dark Ages, when there's no monopoly on force and there's no state and people voluntarily do. Okay, so who's going to? You mentioned these principles, these wonderful highbrow principles of nonviolence, of voluntarism. Who is going to enforce those principles?
Enforce? Well, what do you mean enforce? By like using force to ensure that these principles are mandated to everyone?
Yes. Who's going to do that?
There wouldn't be any force, because that's contradictory to anarchist principles.
So the only thing stopping somebody from using force is the idea that they have these principles. You see what I'm getting at, right?
No, I understand. I understand the kind of contradiction you've alluded to. But I think we'd have to talk about the reason for it. Because if there's no government and there's no what we've described. Okay, so let's go back to the scenario we've described, where Apple sets a colony in the Congo, right, in Africa. Apple is allowed to do that, of course, because it's a voluntary action. It doesn't defy anything in anarchy. The people in the Congo, unless forced there through either the force of Apple or the force of government, are free to move. They're free to leave.
What if Apple just builds a wall? Like, they pull a Donald Trump and they build a wall to keep them all in.
I mean, what if? Right? You could follow this down to so many loopholes. What if half of America killed themselves tomorrow?
well, yeah, but this isn't something that's necessarily a hypothetical. This is something that has happened in recent history. When another,
it's not hard to build labor camps. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So this isn't something that's like a hypothetical that will never happen, and is just like, well, what if tomorrow the sun exploded? What then? Checkmate, atheists. No, this is like, what is going to stop them from necessarily stopping them from being able to exercise the inalienable right to move away from this colony? What is going to stop Apple from becoming a despotic warlord in Africa? What's going to stop them, necessarily speaking? If they simply, if let's say the old sweater guy, Steve Jobs, was reincarnated into an evil mastermind, and he decided to turn Apple into a despotic regime and set up labor camps in Africa. Who is necessarily going to organize to stop them?
Okay. Well, there are a couple of... So what you've described happens now. This kind of stuff has happened throughout history, and it's all been stuff that happens under a government. The government does it for various reasons. So to say that that this can't happen under anarchy, I think would be wrong. So I'm not going to tell you that what you described can't happen, but I am going to try to argue that it happens now when governments exist, and two, when you have the utopian perfect philosophical anarchy, this kind of thing violates the principles. And you also need to bring up like other companies that are people in the United States who can petition Apple's actions and perhaps defund them through the power of petitioning, like through sites like Yelp or the other one. The power of the consumers to petition what Apple is doing, I think, is really great, because what you've...
Yeah. there is that part of it, that if everybody just suddenly decided that Apple was doing something wrong, they would stop buying Apple products. Although I'm a little bit skeptical of that actually working, because Apple is doing something right now that's really wrong, and people still buy Apple products. They use slave wages in China and Indonesia. You know, like they have like 5-year-old girls working on your iPhone in Vietnam, and they're perfectly and liberals in, well, you know, people in general, the sort of like these moralistic jackasses who are always tweeting about how capitalism is wrong on their iPhone still buy Apple products. So I mean, it is a possibility. Like if 100% of the consumers were well-informed, well-intentioned, and acted towards these principles,
I don't even think it has to be 100. Well, I think it would only have to be something like 50%, which I don't think is I don't think it's that difficult. Because setting up a labor camp and building this massive wall and practically enslaving people, hiring the private security firm to enforce the laws there, that's going to be insanely expensive.
Right, but I mean, you know, you can make a lot of money off of that kind of stuff. So it'll be insanely expensive, but the reward, man, the reward for enslaving people, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good investment.
But back to the examples that you brought up now of the stuff that Apple's doing, I think it's worth having a discussion, maybe not in this debate, but it's worth having a discussion about why that kind of stuff happens. Usually, the only reason a company would import jobs to a separate country is because of the environment in the United States has become unprofitable for creating businesses and raising wages and things like that. You could look at Burger King just recently left the United States, and they went to Canada. They set up their headquarters in Canada because Canada has a lower corporate tax rate than the United States. So you need to talk about the reason for why Apple is importing, not just the profit, which is definitely there because they can afford to pay lower wages there, but the reasons for that.
Right. This is necessarily a different argument. I don't know if we should get into that.
I don't think so either.
But right now we're just talking about the anarchist utopia, and you've alluded to this. This is definitely an argument for a utopia, but the issue is that what we keep on coming back to is the idea that these anarchist principles would somehow be universally respected, and universally enforced through voluntary action at the grassroots.
Okay.
And the problem with that is all it would take to subvert these anarchist principles is a mob, is the mafia. You get five Italians in a fucking Joe's Crab Shack. They have a mafia now. They're the new government. That's how this shit works. Unless you unless you necessarily organize to stop them. I mean, let's not talk about Apple. Let's talk about what's happening in Mexico with drug cartels. If you don't have anybody stopping people from selling heroin on the street, we can talk about that in a minute, whether or not heroin should be illegal. But if you don't have anybody stopping them from doing it, they will have that money coming in through an endless flow of junkies, and they will be able to effectively set up their own narco state. So,
what you've just described is it's essentially the black market, and black markets occur when there's a massive. It doesn't even have to be massive when there's just a demand for something, but the supply is cut off through a governmental body. And under anarchy, there would be no governmental body. There may be individuals like corporations who refuse to sell things because of the way that it could hurt their business, but there will be no body saying that people can't choose what they put into their own bodies.
So you're saying that because there's no black market, then the cartels and the crime, it's basically the greatest argument against crime. If laws don't exist, nobody can ever make a crime. But there is an argument that it's the same argument that they've made for pot, right? That because marijuana is illegal, that creates an underground market, and that's what drives the existence of the mafia. But I'm highly skeptical of the idea that just because you make methamphetamine legal to use, you can just go down to a street corner and sell meth now, that will necessarily take away the the ability or the desire for people to build any kind of narco state or use that funds, that money to build a narco state. Because this would still be the same people. I mean, unless you when you make your anarchist utopia, you just like you have a button you can press to kill all the people who don't believe in that principle first, and then you create the utopia. These people will still exist, you know. The same narcos will still exist. The same corrupting influence on government will exist without a government, and they will have the free reign to create whatever kind of narco superstate that they want based off of the income of marijuana and methamphetamine and heroin and whatever they want. So when we were talking about before, if Apple wanted to go into the Congo and created a slave state, well, people will just stop buying Apple products. Well, some people are stupid, right? So, like, maybe not everybody will, but maybe there'll be, like, a campaign, like Coney 2012, that will stop people from wanting to buy Apple products. But what if it's heroin or meth? No, like, if you're a meth addict, you have a physiological need to buy meth. You're not going to stop because somebody puts a fucking hashtag in a video with crying puppies and sad-looking African boys on it. You're still going to buy your meth. So
right, of course. And so I think there definitely is, when you look at meth, there's we're not just looking at slavery, because we do look at like the physiological things and addiction to the substance, but there have actually been cases just recently in 2001, I think it was, Portugal legalized heroin use because Portugal had an HIV epidemic. And so what they did was, instead of trying to stigmatize and ostracize and criminalize people for using the drug, they made it legal. And what this resulted in was it resulted in clinics being propped up. Clinics, I would give you, that were, from what I know, run by the government, but that's aside from the point. It resulted in the rates, the amount of people with HIV decreasing, and it resulted in the amount of crime related to HIV going down dramatically. So when you have this kind of thing, when there's no stigmatization of the use of the drugs, then there's not going to be any, I'm not going to say there's going to be no violence, because people are going to be addicted and they're going to be crazy and out of their mind, but there's going to be no need to fight over use of the substance. It's not going to be as shady as it is.
Most of the violence is actually about distribution territories.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is that, like, when you actually, I actually Googled this right now because I was curious about it. They haven't decriminalized all drugs so you can, like, use it necessarily. But it says that if somebody is found in the possession of less than a 10-day supply of anything, they're sent to a basically rehab. They're sent to rehab, which now we're talking about, you know, whether criminalization, whether throwing someone in jail for using heroin is a bad idea. And
because do people that are in possession of heroin because they're a junkie deserve to be thrown in with the same people that commit rape and murder?
Yeah, if we're going to talk about the drug war, then I think Hagbard and I are pretty much on the same page, that the drug war is fucking stupid, that, you know, throwing people in prison for smoking a joint or even for shooting up, they shouldn't be in prison, they should be in rehab. It's just a stupid thing. But, like, let's talk about, like, legalizing all drugs. Let's leave the sort of argument about whether or not a narco state could exist in an anarchist utopia, and let's talk about the inherently bad action that happens, that human nature provides us the proclivities to do. Because the idea of anarchism is set around this idea that there is a sort of human goodness inside of voluntary actions. That just because something is voluntary, that it must necessarily be perfectly fine, and if it is controlled by the free market, then that's just nature doing what it does, and there doesn't need to be any kind of intervention.
I don't think that you could, like, voluntarily, or at least kind of voluntarily, have sex with a 2-year-old, right? And that's still still voluntary. That doesn't make it right.
Well, I mean, like, the question is whether or not the 2-year-old has the ability to voluntarily have sex with you. But
yeah.
the question is, like, let's talk about something that's completely voluntary that you don't understand later, like a Ponzi scheme. Like, if everybody got into a Ponzi scheme voluntarily, because, hey, remember, they all got into that voluntarily, then, you know, it's going to fall, all their money is going to be lost, and there's going to be a massive fraud, or even, you know, fraud directly. If you sell something on the street that you say is, like let's say you're selling a 2-year-old prostitute heroin, but it's actually meth. Like, that's fraud. There was a voluntary transaction, right? But there was a wrong, there was a lie behind that transaction that made it a violation of that person's property rights. Or let's say that there's there's another thing, like a factory is polluting the air around them because they got, like, all of their neighbors to voluntarily say that they can. But the thing is that pollution of the air is going to travel miles and miles, and it's going to affect everybody else's property rights. Like, let's say, hypothetically, it's a nuclear plant, and it affects everybody's property rights, and it's a badly made nuclear plant, because nuclear plants right now are pretty clean. This is like, you know, a Chernobyl a year, some shit like that. So it affects everybody's property rights within a 300-mile radius of it, okay? So the idea that there can be actions taken in the free market, and so long as it's taken in a free market, it will not have any negative impacts
I didn't say
property
that.
rights.
I didn't say that. Negative externalities will exist in a purely free market or in a regulated free market. They're going to happen anyways. But that the force that is known, or force is a bad word, but the group of people.
If you acknowledge that, you then have to posit that it would happen less in an anarchist state than it does under governmental control.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
All right.
The force that is known as environmentalism is massive. There are a lot of people who are environmentalists. So it's similar to what we talked about with Apple and how petitioning that business could go, because really it'd be the same force stopping that business from contaminating people's air would be environmentalist groups or environmentalist charities or even environmentalist corporations. The force that is environmentalism is going to be pretty good at preventing companies from abusing air pollution, or it might, if it has to go this far, then they could start hurting people that they care about, or hurting themselves and hurting potential business partners. So there are plenty of incentives, though not nearly as great as profit, to limit the amount of pollution that you have now. And as for the Ponzi scheme, which we touched on earlier, what are the few extremely large Ponzi schemes that exist now? There's stuff like Social Security, welfare, things that are run by the government.
Right.
So any free market Ponzi scheme would be voluntary. You hopefully you should know what you're getting into before you get into it, and if you don't, then you need to. It's in your best interest as a consumer to do research on any kind of company that you do business with.
Right, but you know, there's still that fraud. Like I don't want to get into an argument about government fraud, because I'm not of the opinion that the government is perfect and can never do anything wrong. I'm of the opinion that the free market isn't perfect, and the free market can do a lot wrong. So the idea that a Ponzi scheme is justifiable because it's voluntary, that's the issue that I'm having. Because there are still things that can happen that are on the surface, that from any moral understanding, that are voluntary. That when the exchange happened, it was a voluntary exchange. But then later you find out that there was some sort of subversive bad intention or bad action from one of the actors. So like a Ponzi scheme, or, you know, like let's say a 10-year-old prostitute who's addicted to heroin, okay? Something like that. She got addicted to heroin on her own will, her own free will, right? It was her action to get addicted to heroin.
Does she not have parents?
Well, let's say she does, but they're also addicted to heroin, okay? Like, hypothetically.
Okay.
So they're all addicted to heroin, so there is nothing wrong with what she is doing, because it is a justifiably voluntary action for her to prostitute herself, right?
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, necessarily speaking, you would have to say that if you were following if you were following the strictest application of these anarchist terms, where anything that is voluntary is justifiable, or anything that is voluntary is implicitly moral, then you would have to follow that to its logical conclusion and say that a 10-year-old who is addicted to heroin, who is selling herself so she can buy more heroin, completely fine. Can't do anything about it. It's completely fine. That is the end result. This isn't a reductio ad absurdum. This is a direct application of that moral philosophy.
I'm certain that that could happen, but is it likely? No, I don't think it is. The likelihood.
Think it's not, if pedophiles had nothing stopping them from going out and having sex with a 10-year-old girl addicted to heroin, you think that would
aside from it happens massive
all the time,
ostracization.
Wait. Let's pause for 1 second and acknowledge the fact that already occurs right now in Mexico. They're trying to stop it. I mean, just think that's what they're trying to stop it. If this were just an open market,
right? It also happens in England now that since they imported all those fucking Muslims, it happens in England all the damn time. That's what they do. They addict the little white girl, the little kafir, to heroin, and then they fuck her. That's what they do. So it happens right now in a government, with government sanctions and with government forcefully ostracizing these people. If there was no force of so let's just talk about this again. We talked about the economic incentives of starting your own government, starting your own slave state, and what no government can do to stop it. Let's talk about the economic incentives of certain quote-unquote voluntary immoral actions. Like, if there is an incentive to happen with no decentive, like you take away that de-incentivization of it being criminalized, naturally speaking, talking about from a strict, not even like a pragmatic or a moral, from a strict economic terms, it will happen more if there is no de-incentivization. If that incentive is greater and there is no de-incentive, I'm sure there's a economic term. I'm using a clumsy term by de-incentive, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
So it would necessarily happen more if we're following strictly in economic terms.
Yes, from what I know, that if we were looking at strictly economic terms, when there is no government, you limit, or I'm not going to say get rid of because that's not true, but you limit the amount of disincentives to engage in this kind of activity. However, the government and criminalization are not the only disincentives for doing more morally reprehensible things. You would receive for that kind of business would be petitioned immediately and shut down. It would gain no traction whatsoever. And the reason being that let's assume we're talking about the United States and not implementing anarchy in a society where that kind of thing is already accepted, because I don't have an answer for that. If you live in a society where it's already accepted and it already happens, that there's no hope for your society's over. It's awful. But in the United States, where selling drugs and even selling drugs to children more and having sex with children are all regarded as extreme evils, that is an incredible incentive to not engage in that kind of activity.
Okay. So I'm going to leave this up again for like the audience to decide whether or not it would happen more or less if we decided to criminalize it. But we've talked about a number of separate issues where the government would usually take action to stop something bad from happening. And you've proposed that what would actually happen is this free market of ideals would spring into action. These mechanisms of human goodness would suddenly flow forth from the earth, and they would form some sort of organized petitioning to stop this from happening. I'd like to ask you, if you look at that sort of mechanisms, these mechanisms of humans being aware of something and then petitioning for it to stop, how is that mechanism? Like, let's take the use of force, let's take that out of the equation. How is that mechanism any different from the desire for a government?
Because they're not the same thing whatsoever. The goal or the role of the government is it's not the same thing whatsoever as consumer petitioning.
Okay, so in a government like we have right now,
what method of enforcement do you have of the petition? You're just writing words and saying, I won't buy your product when hundreds of thousands... You weren't the target audience anyway.
What?
If the pedophiles aren't petitioning to have pedophilia shut down, they don't need your money. There's no force you can apply aside from that in this scenario.
Right.
And well, the business would need some kind of money to keep that operation going.
Yeah, but they're getting money from pedophiles, and I mean, these pedophiles, they're not like,
what you're talking about is akin to the people who don't play video games petitioning video game companies to stop making these types of video games.
Video games are also not universally condemned like pedophilia is.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a hypothetical speaking. So, like in a market, so the consumer of pedophilia, right, isn't going to care what society thinks about them. Like we already have a laboratory example of right now. Pedophiles don't care about going to jail. So it is clear that they don't care about the condemnation of society if they don't care about going to jail. So if there is less enforcement to that same condemnation, then there would be less care. If these corporations that would be set up, you can petition them as much as you like, but so long as they have pedophiles who are giving them money, then they're gonna survive and they're gonna thrive. And all these people would have to do is just make sure that the business owners are the only face to it, and the actual pedophiles never get doxxed, and they could survive in perpetuity. I mean, there's nothing that a petition could do to stop a corporation from existing if there is enough demand for that thing. So
that's true, but that would have to assume that there is enough demand for pedophilia and this kind of market that is curbed by the government now, and that's the reason it doesn't exist, which we don't know.
Well, I think that there is enough. I think that there is enough evidence to say that pedophilia is in enough demand that it can create a market. Because right now there is a black market for pedophilia. So if there is a black market and you somehow bring that black market to an actual market...
The question is, why is it that you can follow it to its logical conclusion with decriminalizing drugs but not by decriminalizing pedophilia?
No. Okay. I'm not saying that pedophilia won't happen. And I think pedophilia and drug use, they're both black market things, and they're not so much because drugs are different. Pedophilia is pedophilia, but there's different types of drugs. You know what I mean?
Right.
So weed use isn't going to be as stigmatized as heroin use, but pedophilia will 100% of the time be stigmatized.
Well, I mean, first of all, you can't necessarily say that, because there are some countries right now where pedophilia isn't stigmatized. You can't necessarily say that will always exist. I mean, like, if you read Annie of Ann Coulter, she's always talking about those fucking Mexicans loving their child brides. Like, in Mexico, the age of consent is what, 13? Like, it's incredibly low in Mexico. They have a different culture than ours, which, by the way, is why we should build the fucking wall. But
kick them out.
They should all. You should deport yourself. That's basically. But no, the thing is that the idea that there was going to be this natural cultural response, like first, let's say the idea that pedophilia will always be stigmatized. You can't say that. None of us can say for sure what will happen in the future. That's trying to
look at Salon. Christ, we're just trying to keep it together.
They're already trying to decriminalize and pedophilia. They're trying to make pedophiles. Oh, they were born that way, guys. They were born that way. You're just a meanie. You're just You're just an age-phobic meanie trying to keep these pedophiles from expressing their natural love for children. Like, they're already trying to do that shit. They're already
okay. Well,
so
I think
Let me. So that's step one. The idea that this would always be like something looked down upon in society. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence that can happen. Then now step two is the idea that these mechanisms would exist. Like let's say hypothetically, it will be something looked down upon in society, and these petitioning organizations would exist. These petitioning organizations would not help 100% of the time. Maybe like 1 out of 2 pedophile corporations would shut down after a good hashtag movement. But there's still going to be pedophile corporations that will exist in greater number than they already do right now, because these black markets already exist. So if you decriminalize it, then they will exist more. It's simple economics.
Okay.
It's
Well,
simple economics.
we need to clarify our terminology, because pedophilia simply refers to the attraction of a certain age group. I think it's like 10 to 14 or something like that. I don't remember the exact age group. But this attraction...
I'm not gonna lie. I have absolutely no interest in engaging in the debate of terminology for sex offenders.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's not something that's necessary. But I
pedophiles...
think the audience understands what we're talking about good
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. We mean people
being a pedophile and raping a child are different things.
No, it is different,
Yes,
but we're not talking about...
I understand.
We're not talking about raping a child right now. We're talking about a child who's addicted to heroin and wants that dick so that she can buy more heroin. That's not
Yeah,
rape.
we're talking about theoretically consent here.
Like
so the person engaged in the act is inherently a pedophile. He wants to have sex with children. He is sexually attracted to children. Just because he's acting on it doesn't make it a non-issue.
While Salon is still running, because they do produce other I mean, I don't like their content, but they produce other content aside from that pedophile hit piece. What they wrote was, from the people I know, condemned, right? No one agreed with that.
Well, I mean, there was somebody who agreed with it, at least the guy who wrote it. but I mean, like let's take this out of like the theoretic, the pragmatic, because the thing is that none of us can say for certain whether or not pedophilia will be accepted in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. Homosexuality was illegal 100 years ago, right? You cannot say this idea that there is some sort of historic determinism is bullshit. You can't say that. So
you're right.
So again, we're talking about a two-step process. The step one is, will the culture condemn this universally? We don't know. So the idea that these mechanisms, these petitioning mechanisms would exist is unsure. Now, the step two is, will these petitioning mechanisms have any effect? That is economically, we can say with economic certainty that it will have less effect than they do right now. Because the government is a pretty strong petitioning device, because that petition is delivered at the point of a gun, right? Like, the petition by the police is stronger than a petition by Twitter. So there will be less de-incentives, less blocks for these people to enter the free market, so there will therefore be more of them. It's a simple logical train. So when you're talking about heroin, when you're talking about fraud, when you're talking about Ponzi schemes, when you're talking about all of these actions which on the surface are voluntary, they would necessarily be more able to flow. There would be more of them if they were not criminalized.
What about, well, because like you said, we can't, it would be impossible to assert that in 100 years future that people will feel the same about pedophilia that they do now. But what about perhaps private charities that are designed to end sex trafficking or something like that? Private corporations or private charities that are designed to help get girls out of this lifestyle and help them.
Yeah, I can acknowledge that there's a private market for these things, but first and foremost, those things are fucking hugely wasteful. Tons of money is used outside of where they should be, so it has the same problem as government.
You could talk about how private charities, will fix this. But I mean, if you want to look at private charities and government, the argument against government is that they're hugely wasteful. Private charities are also wasteful. But let's say that the perfect charity is, which as an aside, that's also a good argument. It is a good argument against anarchism, because the idea that private charities will necessarily be less wasteful than government is the idea that private charities will somehow not be run by humans and not be afflicted by human nature, while government is still run by humans. See, there's that problem. But specifically saying, bringing this back to the argument, those charities already exist. They're called rehab. It's they exist and they are enforced by the government. So even when you're talking about that as a de-incentivizing tool for pedophilia and for the sex trafficking, there will be less of those if there is not the force of government. Because right now, this charity exists, it has the power of government behind it. If that doesn't exist, then there will necessarily be more of it. There will necessarily be more pedophilia, more pedophile corporations than there are right now.
When you so let's assume for a minute now that when you eliminate the government, you would see pedophile corporations popping up. You would see increases in the amount of pedophiles, assuming we eliminate social ostracization. When you eliminate the government, there would be when you eliminate the government, you would see more pedophiles and more pedophile corporations. You would also, I believe, see more private charities and more petitioning groups or organizations designed to eliminate or combat that. Because what it comes down to is that there is no surefire way to eliminate pedophilia and drug use and child rape at all, because it's like a moral badness inside of humans to do this kind of thing. Right. So whether we could
going in circles, man. Like you're simply saying that after the government shuts down, there will be more charity that will help stop this. We have the biggest charity in the world that is already trying to stop this. It's called the government. Okay, there will necessarily be less charity because the government right now has the use of force behind it. It is basically performing the same role as these petitions, but it has the use of force behind it. So if you remove the role of government, you will necessarily have less de-incentivizes and more incentive for this corporation. I'm just repeating myself because you keep on trying to like bring back this argument that there will be more charity if there's less government. That's saying that the government and charity are somehow performing different roles. They are both performing the same economic role in de-incentivizing pedophile corporations. So, if you have the use of force taken out of this equation, which is the government, you will, no matter the amount of charity, you can have, $500 billion spent on charity a year to stop these pedophile gangs, whatever. That will still be less effective than the use of force, necessarily. So there will necessarily be more incentive, less de-incentive. There's already a demand, there's already a supply, but then there will be more supply, and whether or not there's a demand, we don't know. We can't say for sure, but there will
We don't know that the supply will go up?
Yes, we do. I am setting up this situation. Because
you're saying that supply of pedophilic victims will increase?
Yes, necessary.
Profit to be had, people will extort their children. Yes, I've seen it thousands of times in my life.
Necessarily speaking. Sorry about interrupting you, Hagbard. Necessarily speaking, if there is more incentive and less de-incentive, then there will be more supply. So, in strictly economic terms, not moral terms, in economic terms, if you remove the government, there will be more incentives to have pedophile sex rings, less de-incentives, less blocks for them to get into the free market. Therefore, there will be more supply. It's simple economics. It really is. So
we could, but that's okay. What you've said is correct. The scenario you've built and you described is correct, but it doesn't factor in social ostracization. It doesn't factor in private
totally
charity.
No. I've already factored that in. I've already factored that in because I am saying that no matter how much social ostracization you have, there is no greater tool of social ostracization than being thrown in prison because you are literally being forcefully ostracized from society. So it doesn't matter what free market ostracization you have, that ostracization will be greater.
What we talked about before this, we talked about crime and punishment, and having an anarchaic society doesn't mean that you can't have police forces, and it doesn't mean that you can't have prison cells.
Okay, but how are you going to put people in prison without the use of force?
The use of force, because it wouldn't be force in the sense that you forcefully put someone into jail. What it would be like is that people would. I talked to you about polycentric law previously, and how it would work is people would have rights enforcement agencies, and you would buy into them. You would pay like a monthly fee similar to insurance companies, and they would ensure that it, like if your TV was stolen or something, they would do an investigation and they would find out who stole your TV, and if they couldn't find out who stole your TV, they would give you money to buy a new TV or something. Okay, it would be similar to insurance company. And what we've described, right, you could factor in charity and you could factor in social ostracization, but we haven't brought up yet how private police forces could work. Or
Sure.
Horrifyingly is how they work, man. Private police force is a terrible idea.
Well, let's let him, you know, put his like 2 cents forward. So I like to, for the audience, I'd like to bring this argument up to speed, because I think that this is a good point to transition from simply the moral argument, because moral arguments very quickly descend into pragmatic arguments, because pragmatism and morality are like linked. They're directly linked. If something doesn't work and it kills everybody, then it must necessarily not be moral, right? So we've talked about basically the non-aggression principle and how it would act. We've simply talked about the effects of not having any kind of government on the economy. And in these specific instances where there are these voluntary actions that are still bad actions, that are still immoral, that people agree are immoral, there would necessarily be less de-incentive if there is no use of force. And because charity would not have the use of force, it doesn't matter how much charity you have, that charity will still not have the power of government, because the power of government is necessarily more powerful than charity. So there would necessarily be less incentive. And now you've brought up the existence of a tool that could substitute the use of force of government in a private market. So now we've moved from the moral argument to the practical argument, because now we're asking, can this tool necessarily substitute for the use of force of the government?
I believe so. Because what non-aggression simply means is that you don't aggress against another person. So like I talked about previously, if I were to put a gun up to your head and ask you to give me your money, that would be force. But what we're talking about when we talk about a private police force isn't the same kind of force, because they would never initiate force upon another individual. So if you were to buy into so let's say your family bought into a private police force, and you found out your daughter had been raped, and then your private police force, their job is to get justice for your daughter. So because you pay a monthly fee similar to an insurance company, they would do so. They would use their resources and their money to find out who raped your daughter, and then they would ask for a fine or some kind of repentance fee or something like that. And if the rapist, say they had another private insurance firm or something, or private security firm, my bad, then what you could see, you could be like, wouldn't they would engage in warfare, right? If the rapist had their private security firm and you had your private security firm, and we said, the family who had their daughter raped, their private security firm said that if you don't pay us $10,000, we will come take $10,000 from you. And this isn't the initiation of force, because it's more self-defense, really. So the private security firm, your private security firm, said that we're going to send $8 to the house of the rapist. The rapist says, I'm going to send eight people to my house. So then there's war, right? No, because war is expensive. So we're likely to see some kind of negotiation between the heads of the two private insurance firms, and they can talk to an arbiter or something and interpret the contract where they both agree to abide by the decision. And so we do need some kind of prison cell to deal with rapists, because we don't want to have serial rapists. They pay the $10,000. They really want to rape someone, they'll just pay it again and again and again. So if they refuse to pay the $10,000 fine or whatever, they can perhaps pay it over a certain amount of time. So one day or once a month, they'll pay $5,000 or something like that.
So the problem is that there's a corrupting influence of money. I mean, you mentioned it in this last little bit that they could, if they're really rich and they were fined $10,000, they could just pay $10,000 per rape. 10 grand per rape. It's a pretty good cost. It's that's the market forces. But I mean, the thing is, it
would likely go up.
Well, what if the person isn't paying $10,000 per rape? They're paying $10,000 per month for the American military, and let's say you're really poor, and all you have is a private security firm run by your cousin that you pay $20 a month to. So, how is justice going to work in that situation?
What Are you asking me how we're going to have private security firms for people who don't buy into them?
Well, no, how are you going to have, like, I haven't brought that up, but that's a good question. That's a good question. But how will private security work when one person is paying $20 a month to theirs because they're poor, right? I can't afford $10,000 fucking dollars a month to pay for the equivalent of the U.S. military. But, I'm paying $20 a month for Juan and his friends to carry around AK-47s to basically act as the tough guys on the...
Uncle Vic's guns and fun.
Yeah, that's my private security. Guns and... But, and this rich asshole who raped my daughter is paying $10,000 a month. So how is my security firm going to get justice from him? Is my security firm going to declare war on what is essentially the U.S. military?
No, and the reason being that war is expensive. So
wait. Like, let's not even do war is expensive. Let's do my one that I paid $20 to would fucking lose. So that guy who pays $10,000 to it could rape as many children he wants, so long as he only targets children whose parents were poor.
Which is already what happens in these situations.
It's already something that happens. In the government that we have right now, there is already the corrupting influence of money into the justice system. Because if you rape someone, you can just get a flashy lawyer. If the glove does not fit, you must acquit. That already fucking happens all the time. Because you can buy someone who's really charismatic who can corrupt justice. But if you institutionalize the corrupting forces of money into the justice system, then that won't be just an accident that happens only to celebrities and people who can really afford charismatic lawyers. That will happen necessarily as a tool, as a mechanism of the justice system. Because right now, when money corrupts the justice system, it's an accident. But in your situation, money will corrupt the justice system as a rule, not as an exception.
Money has become the justice system in itself.
Money is justice system. That's not a system of justice. There's nothing just about someone who's poor having no recompense, having no ability to protect themselves. There's nothing just about that. That is necessarily injustice.
The system that we have now, it's definitely no accident when money corrupts it.
No, but we're trying to get that out, and we can't. And we can't. So what's going to happen when that corrupting influence of money is a part of the system? Right now, it's an accident that we want to stop. And that's why we're electing Donald Trump, because we decided to cut out the millionaire, cut out the middleman, and just elect the lobbyist. That's what we're deciding to do. And thankfully, it's Donald Trump and not some evil asshole, thankfully. But the thing is that we already can't stop it. How is it going to get any better when that corrupting influence of money is a part of the system?
Because an arbiter's job, someone who interprets contracts between two individuals, the two security firms, Uncle Vic's Guns and Funds, and the U.S. military, or whatever the equivalent, the rich person had, whatever. The arbiters, their reputation depends solely on their ability to give the right kind of judgment on the right kind of call on any given case. So if Uncle Vic's Guns and Funds provides irrefutable evidence that the daughter was raped, then it is the arbiter has every incentive to rule in favor of Uncle Vic's Guns and Funds.
Every incentive except for further employment by the wealthy.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's the problem. Is that we already have this problem with
but they don't need employment from the wealthy.
Well, yes,
I mean,
wait. Where are they going to get their money?
When you judge reputably, when you say if Uncle Vic's Guns and Funds provides irrefutable evidence and you rule in favor of Uncle Vic's Guns and Funds, yes, the other person, the wealthy person, might not rule in your favor, but you have increased your reputation as a reliable arbiter. Okay. So that means that the likelihood that you
in the free market, you can choose what to, if we're judging this by like a level of the free market, right? A rich person can choose which arbiter to fund, right? So let's say you have a situation where the rich person, the U.S. military, they're defending the rapist, and they decide to hire the most corrupt judge ever. He gets money because he is corrupt, and he will put a rubber stamp on whatever you want. That's where he gets money. And then Uncle Jeb's Guns and Funds, he tries to do. They hire a judge that is the most well-respected, the best judge you can ever imagine, and he judges it. He takes a couple weeks. He works on apple pies and donations from the kittens who eat from his bowl that he sets out at night. He's just a really great person. He judges in favor of the raped daughter's family, and then what happens? Who is going to enforce these judgments? So let's say that.
For the record, we're literally laying out why our justice system is shaped the way it is. Right. Just for the record.
So the thing is that the idea that the rich people would choose the justice that is more just, I think, is really wrong. This isn't a matter of opinion, though. This is a matter of fact, and I can't say this for certain because I don't know any studies. Let's just leave that to the minds of the audience about whether or not the rich people would choose a good judge or a corrupt judge. I think there is enough evidence to suggest that rich people will choose corrupt judges because in our society, they already do. They already do choose the most corrupt judge as they can. Because again, we already have that corrupting influence of money. You're just trying to institutionalize that corrupting influence of money. So who is going to enforce these competing judgments, though? If Uncle Jeb's Guns and Funds gets one judgment, and then the U.S. military gets another judgment. Necessarily speaking, it would have to be the corporations, the paramilitary corporations you're setting up. So let me refer to you by a quote from a brilliant man. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun.
Mao.
Yeah, a great guy. So the thing is that that's incredibly true. If you have enough guns, you can do whatever the fuck you want. So you see the problem inherent with allowing the free market to reign over the justice system.
I think that when a judge's reputation as we do need to talk about corrupt judges and why someone would choose a corrupt judge over another person. But when there is irrefutable evidence, the media would pick up on that. That judge would be outcast, would he not?
Well,
he would have, or what you could have is you could have something similar to a private. The way it would work is you would both people, so Uncle Jeb or whatever his name is, Uncle Jeb's Guns and Funds, and the rich guy, they would have to agree to have an arbiter look at the case, and then they would have to both agree on the decision made.
But what if the other guy just decides not to agree? He just says no. He just says, you know what? I didn't rape that girl. I don't care what the arbiter decides. I'm not going to do it. How is Uncle Jeb's Guns and Funds going to force him to go to jail when he's faced up with the United States military?
I don't know. I think Anarchy has, when you look at it from the way it would be instituted, it has a lot of kinks, and I'm definitely not the smartest anarchist.
No, man raping the children has the kinks. Anarchy is just letting it happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, I talked to you about this before, and I should say that I feel a sort of a proletariat, patriotic, what's the fucking word progressives use all the time? Solidarity. I feel a proletariat solidarity with libertarians because I understand where libertarians are coming from. But there's like a line you have to cross between libertarians and anarchists, and that's the line where I go from you're a reasonable person talking about something that I disagree on, because I do disagree with libertarians about the role of government. But then there's the idea that the government doesn't have any role at all, and that's the point where I have to say, dude, like this is where I personally get triggered, and I have to say that like you're beyond the pale. If I were to form a utopian government, I would not allow you to vote. That's basically, if I were to have a utopia that I if I were to be given despotic power to choose who was allowed to vote,
to be fair, Naked Ape's utopia is fascism headed by him. I mean, just to be fair.
To be fair, my utopia looks like the Planet of the Apes, so it's my utopia isn't much better, but I'm not in charge, so I don't have to make that decision. But
like you said in the very beginning of the podcast, if there's a bunch of people who know more on the subject than I do, but we do have other topics that we wanted to.
Yeah, let's leave this for the minds of the audience. I like doing that because there are some things where you and I, if we can't come to a decision to, or if there's a matter of fact that we don't have statistics in front of us, let's just let the audience Google it. So let's move on to the role of government. And the three things that we have are, well, let's talk about migration first, because that's something that that we're talking about in general politics a lot because of our God Emperor Donald Trump.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So under the system that we have now, I feel definitely needs to be strengthened. The actual government, the way the United States runs things now. But then the anarchic system of immigration would be, I think it would be definitely preferable. This what we're talking about now, anarchy is definitely something I think would be preferable to the system we have now.
Well, and specifically to immigration, I would like you to specifically talk about the benefits of. Well, I mean, would immigration under the anarchist system necessarily be open borders?
Right. So let's say you had a corporation that was near the southernmost part of Florida, and they didn't want people coming into their privately owned land all that often, or at least without their consent. So you could have something like a border there, a wall on your privately owned land that you enforce with a private security firm. Since privately owned landowners would set the terms and conditions for allowing immigrants to come onto their land rather than the government, is simply how it would work.
Okay, all right. So let's gloss over that and let's talk about the next topic we had, and let's talk about these all in totality. So the first one was immigration. The second one was crime and punishment. We've already dealt with that a little bit. This conversation has gone a little bit out of order. So let's skip that and talk about like taxation.
Well, before we approach that, I would just like to say that you've laid out the historical principles of the foundations for the borders of Europe.
Right.
Most of these were merchant empires where they said, these are my lands, these are the rules, this is how it worked. Eventually these people became king.
I actually think that
this is how these things work. Anarchy is cyclical. Anarchy is where we started.
Yeah, I think that is a good point to bring up, because I think that when we're talking about the use of force, and we're going to talk about, the taxation, and I'm going to posit that this is how this conversation is supposed to go, because I've had this conversation with ANCAPs before. So if you own this group of land, this large swath of land, you can necessarily tax people who are inside of that land if it is yours. Would that be accurate to say, right?
You could, so long as there was a contract agreed upon by both parties that allowed that kind of taxation. Also, there would have to be free movement off the property.
Right, but here's the thing: is that there is necessarily an implicit contract when you're talking about someone being inside of your house. So if you are in my house, you follow my rules. So if you are inside of my rice kingdom in Japan, you have to follow my rules or else you get out. So that's the thing.
Yeah, that's vassalage.
Right. So, I mean, like in the old feudal system, there were serfs who could not leave. So there is that's a little bit different in kind. But basically speaking...
All right, 1 second. Let's stop. No. That's never existed on any scale whatsoever, short of feudal Russia. Right. Every other time, no kingdom ever had the capability of stopping people from leaving. It's never been technologically feasible.
Well, yeah. I mean, like technically saying that I'm sure that technically saying you're supposed to stay with your liege lord, and there's a lot of people who just left and we called those people, muggers, because that's where they went. They decided to be muggers. But generally speaking, I think there's a pattern that we can sort of deduce from this conversation we've had when you look at the formation of governments. In Japan, if I'm remembering correctly, and historians are gonna like be in the comments of this, flaming me for butchering this. But this is in general terms. These kingdoms rose out of these rice paddies, right? So whoever owned the food would necessarily be able to have complete totalitarian power over everyone around them, because you have a monopoly on food. Like, this is why,
if you have privately owned, like if you have a chunk of privately owned land with citizens on it, I mean, unless these citizens don't have, their own house, then they can grow their own food. Or it's a profitable relationship that you could allow corporations to grow on your land, and those corporations could offer food to the citizens on their land.
Right, and that's what they used to do. That was called the feudal system, where the king owns all the land and he rents out his land to the dukes and to the counts, and they would grow food and give the king a portion of that, and that was called taxes. And then the people would just move from one count to another, trying to find the best person. So I mean, necessarily speaking, you could have somebody who owns all of the land, and then he controls everything that happens in that land because he owns it. It's his. He's the king. What would stop him from... I mean, like, if you set up a situation where it's like Apple. Apple owns a plot of land. Like, they own Seattle or whatever. Wherever they fucking want to own it. Whatever, hellhole Apple wants to live in. They own that land. They get to dictate what the law is, because there is an implicit agreement when you're in a society. There is an implicit agreement with the social contract by you being inside of that person's land. If you're in my house, you do what I say. Would you say that is generally true?
Yeah, I think so. Unless there's some kind of agreement. Well, because the way I don't imagine it being how you set up your own land, and then everyone that wants to venture to that land, they have to sign a contract. I don't think.
Well, no. I mean. So let's talk about this. Like, you keep on mentioning like a contract. There would be a contract. That contract is called a social contract. It's called the social contract. In the United States, it literally has the physical form of the Constitution. That is literally what our contract is. So the way in which we decide to change this contract between the people who own this land, whether it's Apple, or whether it's Microsoft, or whether it's the King of England, is through the government. It's through representative government. So, like, let me take you through this line of logic that I think should give some clarity to this. So, necessarily speaking, what you've agreed with is that if somebody owns the land, then they would necessarily have 100% power to set any laws that they want because it's theirs. So, and the only way to change that law is with some kind of contract. And whenever that manifests in physical form, the way you change that contract to be beneficial towards the people and still have some benefit towards the rulers, right, is through some kind of representative government or direct democracy or mixed government like we have in the United States. So, how would your anarchist system necessarily be any different from what we have today?
Well, you could do something. So on a chunk of land, you could have something like a homeowners association, where you have representatives there, and then they speak to the homeowners, and they try to get things changed voluntarily, and they can.
We already have homeowners associations, though. I mean, we already have that.
Right, and what you've asked me to describe is very similar to a homeowners association.
Right. Well,
you could have a piece of land where it's owned by one person who bought the land, but the people who live on it, they have their own private property in the form of houses.
But like, these houses in this homeowners association would necessarily be inside of the boundaries of this government, of this higher government. So they would still have to follow the laws of like they're in the state of Texas. They still have to follow the laws of Texas. They would just be able to add another layer of laws. That what you're describing isn't different in any way to what we have. But so Hagbart's mic is terrible, so I'm going to repeat what he said. Basically, what he just agreed that a homeowners association wouldn't be able to tell the higher government what laws to enforce, right? Mm-hmm. It would just be able to apply another set of laws. So what I'm asking you is, how would your anarchist system be any different from what we have right now? Because I basically set up the logical framework of, pragmatically speaking, where government comes from, how our government exists today through the machinations of the social contract and government representation, and then I'm asking you, would there be any practical differences between anarchy and what we have today?
Well, we do have state governments that they do have slightly different laws, like the laws in Texas are going to be different from the laws in California. Right. And so there's a difference there.
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of, sort of, but again, that's like the state, like in our system, the state applies another layer of laws on top of the already existing federal laws. The state can't nullify federal laws. We had a big argument about this.
I was getting to that.
We had a big argument about this, and it was called the Civil War, so, we can't...
In modern times, they've done it with marijuana legislation.
Right.
And the FBI has still come in and enforced. FBI and the narcotics agencies have come in from a national level and enforced it.
Right, and...
So the difference therein would be is that we wouldn't have something like a Federal Bureau of Investigation because there would be no federal government.
Okay.
No, I understand the theory, but what we're saying is within that person's privately owned property that he has instituted, there is no marijuana, that there's no homeowners association that can say you can grow marijuana in your home.
Right. Because basically we're saying, where does the power of government come from? It comes from the ownership of land. Necessarily speaking, if you own some set of land, that would be your government. You are just the king there. So what I'd like to propose is that what would necessarily be different in an anarchy from what we have today is you want the ability to secede from a higher government and form your own plot of land where you would be able to nullify the government's laws.
You could think of it that way. It would be definitely on a larger scale though, because right. it would be everywhere.
So basically, you want to be king in your own castle. I mean, if I want to,
yeah, and this isn't. I'm not deriding you. We all have this. We all have this within us. This is where right wing comes from.
Yeah, I mean, this. I would love to be my king in my own castle. I think that's a great idea. I would love to be the dictator of the world. I would love to do that. Fucking apes ruling over humans. It'd be great. But the thing is that there already is a king, right? I mean, necessarily speaking, if you're going to talk about property rights being the foundation for freedom, right? We already have those property rights. Somebody already owns those property. We have all come together to democratically elect a government which represents us in this social contract. And we all collectively, I mean, this sounds communist, but it really is like a collective ownership of the government and of all land. We all collectively own the nation.
That is precisely the social contract. That's why what we have done is cede our personal power to the United States government, because we know that any one person can't be trusted.
Right. So, like, let's set up a dichotomy. So, the dichotomy you want an individual person to be able to have absolute control over a plot of land. What we have right now stems directly from that, because when an individual person has control over the plot of land, and remember, like we talked about before, political power grows from the barrel of a gun. When they have control over a plot of land, and they have a military that like, let's say it's the strongest military in the world, or let's say that there's a competing militaries. What that looks like is it looks like feudalism. The reason why we have a government is so that the person who owns the land, whether it's the Queen of England or whether it's President Obama, whatever monarch you want to talk about, when they own the land, we have a government that can change the social contract so that their person who owns the land is also acting in the best interest of the people who live on the land. That's where government comes from. So you necessarily want the ability for people to make their own government off of any laws they want, to be able to secede from whatever higher government is. You just want to be able to be basically the monarch.
Well, when you say monarch, that means the singular ruler over other
house.
people.
Well, I mean, not necessarily
okay. Well, if you want to think about it like that, if you want to think everyone is their own monarch,
you got to realize that families can get really big. That's how monarchies come to be. Yeah. That's what the structure of a monarchy
so basically,
is.
Everyone would be the monarch over themselves.
Right, but basically what we're talking about with you right now is the cycle of history. We've already been through this cycle of history where everybody was the monarch over themselves, and then some people owned the land, and then these people decided that, you know what, I'm going to go over there and live next to this guy because he can give me food, and he's better at making food than I am. So that's where governments come from. It comes from the monopoly over some kind of resource that people necessarily needed. There was some guy who had a monopoly on the Nile River. Him and his 5 brothers decided to set up a kingdom on the Nile River, and it grew because they controlled the land, and they told people what to do, and then they became emperors. That's where this comes from. So the reason why government exists is so that whenever if you owned your house, and everybody wanted to move into your house, eventually you would have to decide that we got to have some kind of way to organize people so that people can use the shower at different times. Like that kind of shit. That's where the social contract comes from. That's why we have a government.
Okay.
And the reason why we have a government is so that no one person can have a control over any necessary tool of the economy, like food.
The Italian little nation states rose up. The United States government made sure to instill itself with little conspiracies to constantly be at war with each other, so no one conspiracy can gain power.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, Hagbard.
No, that's why we separated. That's why we have the branches of government that are constantly checking and balancing.
Like this is
checks and balances. These are conspiracies. These are groups of people operating for their own means. These are little conspiracies fighting each other so that no one conspiracy can rule.
That's exactly. So necessarily speaking, the reason why we have government, okay, why we have any government, is through a trial of error of millennia of statescraft that has crafted a situation, a social contract that has survived, again, through trial and error, to bring us the most amount of freedom and the most amount of independence that a society can suffer without descending into chaos. That's the reason why we have government. It's not something that sprang out of nowhere. It's not one despotic person who's like a conspiracy of Bill Gates and George Soros to destroy Americans and it's not a Jewish conspiracy. Is basically what I'm getting at. It's through a trial and error. This is the reason why we have government, is because we already had anarchy, and then some people were able to gain a monopoly over some independent resource. And this is where I think the role of government starts. The role of government starts on the monopoly on these necessary resources, like water, like food, sewage, the use of force and justice, the justice system, and then roads. Because, roads are necessarily, if you own a road, then you necessarily have a monopoly on that road. Owning the road gives you a monopoly over that, and pragmatically speaking, when you have a monopoly over something, you have effectively a kingdom. That's why we don't have monopolies anymore. That's why we have government, is to stop any one person. Like, let's not call them a corporation. Let's say it's to stop any one person from having a monopoly on any resource. Because once you have a monopoly on a resource, you are necessarily, pragmatically speaking, a king.
Yeah, that all makes sense.
Did I just convert you from anarchism?
I mean, I always knew that it had a lot of problems with it. I feel like the practical application of it. I don't buy into the practical application of it would result in war and like chaos and violence. I don't think that would happen. But I think there would be a lot of problems that would be more effectively, while they could be effectively mitigated by the powers of a free market, could be more effectively mitigated by the powers of a government.
Right, like roads, because these are I like to express this to you. So people oftentimes like to remove practicality from reality, as if like they like to remove human nature from reality, to say that, well, human nature is something way over there that we need to reach. Well, the reality that we are living in right now is necessarily practical. So necessarily speaking, the practical result of anarchy, what we had 10,000 years ago, is government. Government is practical because it works, because it exists. Necessarily speaking, if communism worked, then communism would be what exists right now. Because we don't live in some nature that is corrupted by human influence, right? Mm-hmm. We live in a world that is the result of human nature. Government is the world that we live in right now is necessarily the result of human nature. So that's the issue.
Or as Voltaire said, unironically, that we live in the best of all possible worlds.
The best of the shitty worlds. But I mean, once Donald Trump is elected emperor, it will be the best of all worlds. once all the Mexicans deport themselves, it'll be better.
No, but in all seriousness, my statement about anarchy has always been anarchy just is. It is the natural state of humanity. We've imposed several layers on top of it, but if you understand that removing those layers does not make humanity a better creature.
Right. And like that's what we're saying, is that people like to say that, oh, anarchy is something different. Human nature is out there and we have to reach it. I mean, this is why I dislike, like, libertarians are okay. Like, I have disagreements because
libertarians and anarchists I can deal with. I'm with you, man. Damn the Marxists. They think humans are really nice. At least the anarchists are willing to admit bullfight.
Yeah.
The Marxists just think people will stop, and that's fucking delusional.
The Marxist thinks, oh, once you remove the government, we will all live like these beautiful angelic creatures. That's just so fucking retarded. At the very least, anarcho-capitalists understand that there is a necessary hierarchy built on currency, and that exists because people are naturally more talented than other people. And removing that would destroy society. But the problem I have is that there is still the same kernel of a lie in anarcho-capitalism. It's less so in libertarianism because, like most libertarians, they're only libertarians because I want to smoke weed and shoot an AR-15 at the same time. I'm right with you. I want to smoke weed and shoot guns. I want to do that as much. That's what I want. But the thing is that when you're talking about this idea, this is the problem, is that this idea that there is a human nature somewhere out there that we have to reach, that there is human nature and that we need to just alter society to match this greater human nature. That is the same problem with Marxism and communism and the left that I have a problem with. This desire to manufacture a reality, this desire for social engineering. That is what anarcho-capitalism is. It is the same desire for social engineering that says that we can just change society to better fit human nature. This basically ignores the fact that our society right now is fitting the human nature that we have. Our society right now is the result of human nature.
And it's how you logically conclude something along the lines of all cultures are not equal, because some cultures haven't taken some necessary steps beyond that initial stage of tribalism and finding boundaries and those sort of things.
Right. And this is why I when I talk to Hagbard, I find myself, I legitimately think that Hagbard and I are basically we've come to the same conclusion, but we have like little disagreements on economics, because we both understand the core value of Western civilization. The core
fundamentally,
value,
I think I just feel worse for poor people than he does. That's all.
Right. Well, personally, I think that poor people should just stop being poor. What the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you want to be poor?
Exactly.
But I mean, the thing is that we both understand that government in our society right now isn't a divergence from human nature. The United States is a result of human nature. And the government that you have in Egypt and in these Islamic countries are the result of those human natures. because Iran is a perfect representation of what Muslims believe in. They like to cut off people's heads and stone women for being raped.
Let's be frank. If you had been raised in an environment that explained that to you, and this was something I wanted to touch on before we wrapped, we like to ignore the imposition of cultural values that government gives us, the unity of cultural values.
Exactly.
When that fractures, it gets ugly.
Like, I wanted to bring this up when we were talking about pedophilia, because we were talking about pedophilia, whether or not it would become accepted in society. The government necessarily acts as a tool for divining morality. I mean, that is really what the first governments were. If you look at the Roman government, which is something that I turn to, they had religion and the divinement of morality and superstition as an integral part of the mechanisms of government. This is because the government has the tool of the use of force. Because I think that Hagbard is the closest I found to someone on the left who understands human nature. Because this is the core of why I disagree with libertarians and anarcho-capitalists, is that they don't understand the 5 different tools, or are they around 5 different tools that make up government. Because these are the 5 principles that make up our human understanding of morality. Like go look at Jonathan Haidt's. He wrote a book. Jonathan Haidt. He's the guy who co-wrote the article on The Atlantic, The Coddling of the American Mind. Something like that. He wrote a book on this, and it's brilliant. And what he realized is that conservatives understand and value all 5 of these principles. Liberals only value 2. They only value the liberty, and they only value the aversion to harm. Libertarians don't value the aversion to harm.
I think we're starting to see that some liberals also value social cohesion, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like you. Like, this is why I really love talking to Hagbard, because he's the liberal that I want to be in opposition with. I wish every liberal was like you, Hagbard. I love you.
Me too. That's why I'm here.
But no. Thank you again for coming and talking with us. I want to make sure that all the libertarians who are going to rage at me now, you know that if you want to talk to me, my Twitter DMs are open. They will be until I get so popular that I can't respond to every single one. So if you want to come on and, shill your idea of libertarianism or anarcho-capitalism, that's perfectly fine. I really appreciate you coming on, Sam. It was really a great conversation.
Yeah, it was a good time. Thanks.